Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepless Creator tonight. I've brought you a calm, gentle story, a bedtime sleep story, crafted for sleepless minds and restless hearts. This is more than just history for sleep. It's a soft-spoken escape into forgotten times and quieter worlds, designed to help you fall asleep fast. If your thoughts are racing, or if peace feels far away, you're in the right place. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let these sleep-inducing stories guide you gently into rest. Your quiet night begins now with Sleepless Creator *. Story 1. The Silk Handkerchief, a saloon madam's secret weapon in Tombstone. The weight of velvet curtains. *. Good evening, friend. Take a slow breath. Feel your shoulders melt into the softness beneath you, and imagine the faint glow of an oil lamp flickering just beyond your eyelids. You are about to drift into the soft creaks and hushes of an old saloon where secrets breathe beneath velvet curtains, and even the smallest handkerchief can steer an empire in the shadows. You find yourself walking down Allen Street in Tombstone, Arizona. It is 1881. But there are no gunshots tonight, no racing hoofbeats, only the slow shuffle of boots on packed dust, and the sigh of the wind weaving between hitching posts. The sky above is a deep violet dome, pricked here and there with pale stars, and the smell of creosote and sweat hangs in the air. The gas lamps flicker along the wooden sidewalks, their glow pooling in uneven circles on the ground. You pass closed shops, the general store with its faded sign, the gunsmith's place where shadows lean inside dusty windows, the tailor's where bolts of bright cloth wait silently. At the corner, a faint music drifts out, tugging you closer like a gentle hand at your sleeve. The Oriental Saloon stands before you. You hesitate for a moment, taking in the saloon's wide double doors, painted signs advertising whiskey, faro, and ladies upstairs. A horse nickers from a nearby hitching rail, and you catch a glimpse of a figure moving behind the curtain of an upper window, someone looking out into the darkness, perhaps searching for a face that will never return. As you step inside, the room swells around you. The warmth of bodies, the bittersweet smell of spilled beer and cheap perfume, the murmur of conversation, it all rushes at you like a rising tide. You pause, adjusting to the flickering lamplight that hangs in brass sconces and from chandeliers made of old wagon wheels. The piano player, an older man with a slouch hat and ink-stained fingers, coaxes a slow, mournful tune from the keys. Your eyes are drawn to a woman standing near the far end of the bar. Her presence is like a cool draft on a summer afternoon. Quiet, almost invisible at first, yet commanding once you truly notice her. She wears a dark dress trimmed with pale ribbon, her hair pinned high in a neat coil. In her right hand, she holds a small, pale silk handkerchief. This is Josephine in Tombstone. Josephine is known for her careful silences. Some say she arrived from New Orleans on a riverboat that ran aground. Others whisper that she once danced at the Paris Opera, or that she fled an Eastern boarding school. No one knows for sure, and she encourages the mystery with a gentle smile and an arched eyebrow whenever someone dares to ask. Josephine's silk handkerchief is not merely for show. It is her language. A slow wave means a customer is welcome to approach. A quick flick warns the bartender to refuse another drink. A small twist around her fingers tells the girls upstairs to prepare. Over time, this system grew into a private ballet known only to her staff, woven from necessity and survival tonight. The air is thick with cigar smoke and the restless energy of men who have spent weeks underground or on horseback. They arrive with pockets full of dust-covered coins and the ache of loneliness in their eyes. They come seeking warmth, music, and the brief illusion that someone might truly see them. Josephine sees them all, and she sees through them a miner, stumbles toward the bar, hat askew, a grin stretched wide across his sunburnt face. He slams a silver dollar down, demanding whiskey with a shout. Josephine watches from her corner, fingers tightening just slightly on the silk. The bartender, catching the signal, pours a weaker drink, slipping a bit more water into the glass. The miner doesn't notice. He laughs, tossing the drink back as though it might save him from some private ghost. Josephine scans the room again. To her left, a group of cattlemen plays faro, cards shuffling in practiced hands. A low argument brews, punctuated by nervous laughter. She knows that laughter. It sounds like a frayed rope just before it snaps. She tilts her handkerchief subtly. The piano player shifts his tune to a softer, more calming melody, a slow waltz that coaxes tempers back into their sheaths near. The staircase. A girl named Flora sits on a low stool, sewing a tear in her pale blue petticoat. Flora arrived here just last spring, brought west by a promise of work in a sewing shop. Instead, she found herself trapped by debts and loneliness. Josephine took her in, gave her room and board, and offered a choice: work the floor or sue. Costumes and linens in the back. Flora chose the latter, though sometimes she lingers near the stairs, staring at the door as if expecting a brother to burst in and pull her away. Josephine's own quarters are hidden, behind a heavy velvet curtain, in the far corner. Inside, her small sanctuary feels a world apart. An oak writing desk, a single bed covered in a quilt of mismatched patches, and a shelf lined with small bottles, rosewater, lavender oil, and whiskey in a blue glass decanter. Above the bed hangs a framed piece of embroidery, a spray of violets, stitched in delicate silk thread. Some say it was made for her by a lover in New Orleans. Others claim she stitched it herself during lonely desert nights. Beyond the curtain, life surges on. A young cowboy leans too far across the poker table, sending cards fluttering to the ground like moths. A woman in a crimson dress laughs, her voice like warm syrup, and adjusts the peacock feather in her hair. Josephine notices everything. The flick of her handkerchief becomes a gentle dance, a slight swirl for the bartender, a tiny wave for the piano, a twist for the girl at the faro table. Time in the saloon does not pass in hours, but in tides. The rush of guests, the rise and fall of laughter, the slow ebb of coins from pockets to the till. Somewhere outside, a coyote howls, and you imagine the moon gliding silently above the roof. Josephine steps behind the bar briefly to speak to the bartender, a thin man with a long mustache named Wallace. Their conversation is quiet, like the shuffle of a deck in a dark room. She mentions the miner at the end of the bar, worried he might start trouble later. Wallace nods, already planning to slip the man a final weak drink and guide him toward the door before midnight. In the back kitchen, a pot of beans simmers on a low stove. The cook, a quiet man called Raphael, hums an old Spanish lullaby. Raphael has a story of his own. He once cooked for a mining camp farther north, but a cave-in buried his savings, along with the men he fed. He drifted south and found shelter under Josephine's roof. At night, he dreams of orange trees and his mother's kitchen, the smell of garlic and rosemary. Now, imagine you're drifting upstairs for a moment. The narrow hallway feels uneven beneath your feet, the floorboards groaning with each step. Rooms open on either side, each with a small bed, a cracked mirror, and a basin with cold water. One room has a vase with wilted daisies. Another has a slipper forgotten under the bed, its ribbon frayed. You can almost hear the soft breathing of the women sleeping inside, those who finished early, those who waited in vain for promised guests. There is a stillness up here that presses gently on your shoulders, as though urging you to hush your thoughts and simply listen. Back downstairs, the piano stops momentarily. A hush sweeps the saloon. Josephine looks up sharply. Her fingers tighten round the silk. Someone has come in, a figure at the door, silhouetted against the night. Slowly, as though stepping from a dream, he moves into the light. His hat is low, his coat dusty. Every eye follows him. Josephine remains still. She tilts the silk, signaling the bartender to keep watch. The new guest orders quietly, pays with a gold coin, and moves to a corner table. His eyes scan the room but do not linger. After a moment, the piano resumes, the room exhales, and life slides gently back into place. Josephine watches the stranger for a long time. Perhaps she's measuring his potential for trouble. Perhaps she's reading a story in his posture. A long ride, a lost fortune, or a missing family. Her calm gaze never wavers, and her hand rests lightly on the handkerchief as if it were a lifeline. At midnight, the saloon begins to thin. Men stumble toward the door, some carried by friends, others guided by gentle nudges from Wallace. A few women slip upstairs, their skirts whispering against the worn wooden steps. The lanterns are turned lower, casting soft halos on the walls. Josephine moves quietly among the last guests, offering a word here, a touch there. Her presence feels like a warm quilt pulled up to the chin, comforting and final at each table. She gathers empty glasses, straightens cards, smooths rumpled tablecloths. The silk handkerchief now hangs loose from her fingers, as though exhaling after a long vigil. When the last man is gone, she steps to the door and slides the bolt into place. Outside, the desert is a black sea, the stars scattered like salt grains. Across its surface, Josephine leans against the door for a moment, head bowed. A ledger of shadows and light asterisk, and now, friend, breathe out slowly. Allow your shoulders to sink a little deeper. The night is long and kind, and you are safe here, among old wooden walls and the soft hush of secrets. We return now to Tombstone, to Josephine's quiet kingdom beneath the amber lamplight, where each sigh and flicker writes another line in a forgotten ledger. The dawn rises hesitantly over Tombstone, painting the edges of roofs and the tops of dusty hitching posts in shades of pale rose and soft gold. Outside, the desert is a sea of muted greys and ochres, stretching endlessly to where the distant hills hover like sleeping animals. The streets are nearly empty, only the sweep of a broom against wooden boards and the occasional jingle of a harness disturb the hush. Inside the Oriental saloon, Josephine is already awake. She sits at her oak desk, her back straight despite the long night. Her silk handkerchief lies neatly folded beside an ink pot and a heavy ledger bound in cracked black leather. A small brass lamp flickers nearby, its flame dancing gently as, though breathing along with her, she dips the nib of her pen into the ink, then pauses, listening to the low creaks and small movements around her. From the kitchen, Raphael begins preparing a morning meal, oatmeal sweetened with molasses and slices of cold pork left from the previous night. Wallace, still groggy, sets about wiping down the bar, each stroke of his cloth echoing in the morning quiet. Josephine begins to write in the ledger. She records every detail: coins taken at the faro table, whiskey served, broken glassware, repairs needed for the stair rail, every sum, every expense, every name. In these quiet, pale hours, her world is numbers and fine, looping letters. She notes the new tear in Flora's petticoat, a missing hair comb from one of the upstairs rooms, a mysterious payment left on the bar, a silver ring set with a small turquoise stone. This ledger is her second language, as silent and potent as her silk handkerchief. She learned to keep these books during her early days in New Orleans, where she worked in a dance hall under the watchful eye of Madame Lisette, a woman famed for her golden parasol and her cold gaze. Lisette taught Josephine that survival was not in loudness, but in quiet observation, in reading the rise and fall of a coin purse, the tremble of a hand, the subtle tilt of a chin. Josephine closes her eyes for a moment, the tip of her pen hovering above the page. She sees the faces from last night, the miner with his loose grin, the traveling salesman who spoke of far-off railroads, the cowboys who played cards in near islands. Each one left a trace, not only in the ledger, but in her mind. The door at the far end of the saloon opens softly. Flora steps in, her hair unbraided and falling over her shoulders like a pale waterfall. She carries a tray with 2 cups of chicory coffee, each steaming faintly in the cool morning air. She places one near Josephine without a word, then perches on a nearby stool, her fingers twisting in her lap. "Thank you," Josephine murmurs, her voice low, nearly blending with the soft scratch of the pen. Flora smiles, her eyes shy but warm. In another life, perhaps Flora would have been a seamstress, in a small shop or a music teacher in a quiet town. Here, she is both helper and witness, drifting between the worlds upstairs and down. A moment later, Wallace shuffles over, carrying a small stack of silver coins. "Last night's final count," he mutters, placing them carefully beside the ledger. His voice is rough, like gravel at the bottom of a dry stream. Josephine nods, makes a quick note, then slides the coins into a small wooden box lined with felt. "Anything else?" she asks, without looking up. "One of the poker men said he might return tonight. He seemed ... uneasy. Might be trouble." Josephine looks up then, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Did he leave a name?" Wallace shakes his head. Just a stare that went on too long. She nods slowly, turning her attention back to the page. Trouble is an old dance partner in Tombstone. Josephine does not fear it. She anticipates it the way one might watch for rain clouds on the horizon. She closes the ledger softly, as though laying a child to sleep. Then she stands, taking her cup of coffee and moving toward the front window. The glass is smudged from hands and faces pressed against it on noisy nights. She lifts the curtain slightly and peers outside. A man pushes a broom across the boardwalk, his movements slow and almost meditative. A dog lies curled under a wagon, flicking its ear at a buzzing fly. Across the street, a woman in a faded bonnet empties a bucket of grey water into the dust, where it vanishes immediately into the thirsty earth. Behind her, Flora hums faintly, a tune from some distant memory. The sound wavers like a candle flame. In a breeze, small and comforting, Josephine's gaze drifts higher, to the rooftops and beyond, where the pale morning light spills across the desert. She thinks of her first weeks here, the way the sun felt like an unwelcome hand on her neck. The silence of the night so deep it felt like a living thing. In those days, She clutched the silk handkerchief constantly, as if it alone could anchor her in this raw, sprawling place. Over time, she learned the subtle patterns. When the men arrived in droves after a big silver find, when the town emptied, after a gunfight, when the price of whiskey soared, when the roses in her hidden garden began to wilt from neglect. Each detail folded into her like a quiet prayer. She turns away from the window, finishing her coffee in a long, slow sip. Then she walks to a small shelf above the bar, where she keeps her personal tokens, a tiny cameo from New Orleans, a folded fan with painted cranes, and a thin gold ring that no longer fits her finger. Each object holds a chapter, a moment when she decided to stay, to fight, to breathe. Flora finishes her tune and stands, smoothing her dress. "I'll see to the laundry," she says softly. Josephine nods, watching as the younger woman gathers a basket and disappears toward the back. The saloon is almost silent now, but it is a living silence, like a deep pool with currents you cannot see. Josephine moves to a small side room. Behind the bar, a narrow space that serves as an office and occasional refuge. Here, the walls are lined with scraps of fabric, old ledgers, empty whiskey crates repurposed as shelves. She sits again, her fingers tracing the edge of her silk handkerchief, which she has now tied loosely around her wrist. The gesture feels ceremonial, like a ritual performed before a storm, from a locked drawer. She removes another book, smaller than the public ledger, bound in green leather. This one is her private record, debts owed to her, secrets learned, in whispers, hidden arrangements that keep the saloon safe from raids or violent outbursts. In Tombstone, power lives not only in pistols, but in information carefully hoarded. She opens to a page halfway through and reviews. Her notes, a cattle driver's quiet debt for a sister's doctor visit, a gambler's secret stash behind the dry goods store, a sheriff's occasional indulgence covered up with polite silence. Each line is written in her precise, elegant hand. As she reads, her mind moves beyond numbers and secrets. She recalls a night 2 years ago when a young woman arrived at the saloon door, barefoot and bleeding from a split lip. Josephine took her in without question, offered hot water and a spare dress, and asked no questions that night. In the morning, the girl had vanished, leaving only a rosebud from Josephine's hidden garden on the table. Sometimes, Josephine wonders where that girl went. Did she find peace in some far-off town, or did the desert swallow her story whole? These questions flicker through her mind, soft as moth wings, before dissolving into the quiet. The door creaks, and Raphael appears, holding a tray with a small bowl of oatmeal and a wedge of bread. "You must eat," he says, his voice as steady as the desert itself. "Thank you, Raphael," Josephine replies, accepting the tray. She eats slowly, savoring each spoonful as if it were a ceremonial act. Food here is not a pleasure but a necessity, fuel for the endless calculations and quiet battles of the day. Raphael stands in the doorway for a moment, watching her with a fatherly concern that he never voices aloud. Then he nods and returns to his kitchen. As Josephine eats, her eyes wander across the room, resting on small things, a chipped glass on the shelf, the deep scratches in the wooden counter from a long-forgotten fight, a single feather from a dancer's costume caught in a corner cobweb. Each of these small relics tells a story, whispers of nights that seemed endless, of mornings that arrived like distant drums. Finished, she sets the tray aside and stands. Outside, the day has brightened. The sounds of wagons and distant hammering drift in through the window. Life stirs beyond the walls of the saloon, yet inside remains a sanctuary of slow breaths and measured steps. She moves through the main room, checking each table, straightening chairs, collecting stray playing cards. Under one table, she finds a small pocket knife engraved with initials she does not recognize. She turns it over in her hand, feeling its weight, its smooth handle worn from years of use. She places it gently in a box behind the bar, an unofficial lost and found that is rarely claimed. In the far corner, a half-empty glass of whiskey glows softly in the morning light. She lifts it, breathes in its sharp scent, and pours it into a bucket for discards. As the amber liquid swells away, she imagines the voices that accompanied it. Loud boasts, quiet confessions, brittle laughter. Each echo dissolves like sugar in warm tea. The soft armor of night asterisk, and now, let us sink deeper. Let each breath lengthen, the world around you fading into the warm hush of oil lamps and linen sheets. You're safe here, walking softly beside Josephine as the sun bows low and the hush of evening gathers like a velvet cloak. It is late afternoon in Tombstone. The sky above shimmers with the last sharp brightness of the desert sun, and shadows begin their slow march across the dust. The town holds its breath in this brief hour between heat and twilight, an in-between place where secrets feel heavier, and every sound seems wrapped in cotton. Inside the Oriental saloon, the quiet hum of preparation fills the space. Wallace stacks clean glasses behind the bar, his movements slow and deliberate. Flora irons a pale pink dress in the back, the hot iron hissing softly as it glides over cloth. Raphael stirs a pot of beans and hummingbird eggs in the kitchen, an unusual delicacy traded from a passing merchant. The gentle aroma of chili peppers and roasted corn drifts through the saloon, curling around corners like a familiar cat. Josephine stands at the top of the stairs, a place she rarely lingers. From this high perch, she can see everything. The scuffed piano keys, waiting for fingers. The tables arranged like a chessboard of possibilities. The heavy red velvet curtains that frame the stage and guard the rooms beyond. She wears a deep blue dress tonight, its satin catching the light in slow waves. At her wrist, the silk handkerchief rests, its pale edge like a moonbeam against her skin. This piece of silk is more than a signal. It is armor, a talisman woven from every silent negotiation, every midnight promise, every moment she kept the peace without a gun. Below, a knock at the door. Wallace glances up, wiping his hands on his apron. Josephine nods, once, a silent permission. The door swings open to reveal a slim man with a sun-scorched face and a wide hat pulled low. Behind him, a few dusty travelers wait their turn, hats in hand, eyes scanning the dark interior like children peeking into a forbidden room. The slim man steps in, his boots leaving faint prints on the sawdust-strewn floor. He removes his hat, revealing hair like tarnished copper, and offers a small, cautious smile. Josephine recognizes him at once. Elijah Beck, a gambler known across the territory for his sharp cards and softer heart. Elijah, Josephine calls down softly, her voice floating through the room like the last note of a lullaby. He looks up, his eyes brightening. "Miss Josephine," he replies, inclining his head. Their exchange is brief, but it ripples through the saloon like a pebble dropped into a still pond. The other newcomers follow inside, seating themselves with careful glances, unsure whether to speak or simply watch. Josephine descends the stairs slowly, each step measured. Her dress whispers around her ankles. She stops beside Elijah, her eyes flicking to the small case in his hand, a well-worn faro deck and a few ivory chips. "You playing tonight?" she asks. "If you'll allow," he says, his grin warming. The space between them, she considers for a moment, then lifts her silk handkerchief, giving it a gentle, flowing wave. Wallace, seeing the signal, sets up the faro table at the corner. The piano player, returning from an early dinner, takes his seat and begins a slow ragtime piece. The notes rolling like lazy ripples across a pond as guests filter in. Josephine moves from table to table, greeting each arrival with a nod, a touch, a soft word. Some of the men are miners, still bearing the grime of the shafts. Others are cattlemen, their shoulders bent from endless days under sun and saddle. Among them sit traveling salesmen, stagecoach drivers, the occasional prospector hoping to forget the loneliness of his claim. The saloon transforms as dusk deepens. Lamps are lit, their amber glow painting warm pools against the walls. The scent of Raphael's stew mixes with the sweet perfume dabbed behind dancers' ears. Laughter bubbles up, cautious at first, then swelling in quiet waves, near the piano. A woman named Liza adjusts the feathers in her hair. Her fingers tremble slightly. Tonight is her first evening on the floor. Josephine pauses by her, the silk handkerchief twisting slightly in her hand. With a single look, she conveys volumes. Stand tall, move slowly, smile only when it feels true. Liza breathes in deeply, straightens her back, and drifts toward a table where 3 men play cards. In weary silence, one glances up, his face brightening, as though a lantern has been lit inside him. Josephine watches from the corner, her fingers tightening and releasing the silk in rhythm with the piano's low chords. Beyond the saloon walls, the night settles firmly over Tombstone. Coyotes yip in the far distance, and the moon lifts its pale face above the horizon, draping silver light across the desert floor. Inside, time bends and softens. Hours no longer march in straight lines, but pool into soft eddies of music, laughter, whispered negotiations. Elijah's faro game grows heated. Chips slide across the felt like water on glass. Cards flick and fold with practiced grace. Josephine stands close enough to sense the undercurrents, the building tension, the quick glances toward hidden pistols, the subtle shift of a man's hand toward his coat at one point. Elijah leans back and lets out a low, melodic laugh. The others pause, eyes narrowing, fingers tensing. Josephine tilts her silk handkerchief subtly. The piano player slows, weaving the notes into something gentle and uncertain. Wallace moves closer to the table, cloth in hand, as though merely cleaning. The moment passes, tension dissolving like morning fog. The game resumes, softer now. The men reminded that violence is watched and shaped here by an unseen conductor's hand. Josephine steps away, her breath steady. She moves toward the bar, where Flora now stands beside Wallace, learning to pour drinks with cautious hands. Flora fumbles a glass, catching it just before it falls. She glances at Josephine, cheeks flushed, eyes wide with apology. Josephine smiles, a small, genuine curve of her lips. She lifts her handkerchief in a small wave. A private sign. You are safe. Mistakes are allowed here. Flora exhales, her shoulders relaxing. She tries again, pouring a measure of whiskey with trembling care. Josephine nods, moving along the bar to check on supplies. Adjust bottles, slide stray coins into the till. Tonight's rhythm grows steady, almost hypnotic. Guests move in gentle currents, from tables to bar, to the piano, and back again. The glow of lamps glints off brass buckles, glass tumblers, polished boots. In quiet corners, deals are struck, small ranch claims traded, new partnerships whispered, love confessed in careful, trembling words. And all the while, Josephine drifts among them, her silk handkerchief rising and falling like a silent metronome. Each signal keeps the room breathing as one, preventing sudden storms, smoothing sharp edges. Outside, the moon climbs higher, its light spilling into the upper rooms. A few guests climb the stairs slowly, the boards creaking under their cautious steps. Each carries his own soft hopes, folded away beneath the weight of the day. Josephine watches them, noting which rooms are occupied, which doors remain closed. She moves to the staircase landing, resting her hand on the rail polished by countless palms. For a moment, she looks up, past the rooms, beyond the roof, into the infinite hush of stars above. She thinks of other nights, other saloons, other cities. She remembers dancing in a hall in New Orleans, the music loud enough to tremble the floor beneath her slippers. She remembers sitting on a pier, her feet dangling above black water, a hand in hers that felt warm and sure. She remembers letters folded with care, sealed with wax, sent across oceans and deserts, letters that never returned. The piano shifts into a softer waltz. Josephine closes her eyes, feeling the tune curl around her spine like a shawl. She steps slowly down, rejoining the floor. In a corner, an argument flares to minors disputing a card hand. Voices rise, chairs scrape, hands hover near pistols. Josephine moves immediately, her handkerchief sweeping in a low, elegant arc. Wallace is there in a breath, calm and steady. A word here, a touch on a shoulder, a gentle hand guiding a bottle back to the table. The tension unwinds. The miners mutter and settle, eyes downcast, hands moving away from their weapons. Josephine offers a brief nod, her eyes meeting each man's in turn. Peace reclaims the room, fragile but whole. The piano resumes its gentle story, and the saloon exhales once more. Flora returns to the bar, slipping a small bouquet of wild desert flowers into an empty whiskey bottle. The flowers droop slightly, their pale petals shimmering in the lamp's glow. Josephine notices, and her face softens, an unexpected island of color in this muted sea. Later, the last guests trickle toward the door. Elijah packs his cards, and Chips, exchanging small coins and quiet goodbyes. Wallace stacks empty glasses, his movements almost reverent in their slowness. Raphael emerges to collect stray dishes, humming his lullaby under his breath. Josephine stands at the door, her hand on the bolt. One by one, the guests tip their hats, some whispering thanks, others simply offering a nod. Each carries a piece of this night away with them, a warmth to cradle in the lonely hush of the desert beyond. Finally, the door closes. Josephine slides the bolt with a finality that echoes in the empty room. She moves slowly now, gathering forgotten scarves, smoothing tablecloths, turning down lamp wicks. In the mirror above the bar, her reflection follows her, a quiet ghost moving among the shadows. In her office, she unties the silk handkerchief and lays it on her desk. Her fingers drift over it lightly, as if touching the wing of a small bird. Story 2. The Scent of Cedar, a widow's tea house on the old Tokaido road steam. Silence and swallows asterisk. Good evening, friend. Sink a little deeper into your blanket. Let your eyelids grow heavy, as though they were carrying tiny pools of moonlight. In tonight's gentle turn of the path, we leave behind the dusty hush of Tombstone and wander far east, to a road lined with cedar and fog, the Tokaido Road of Edo, Japan. Imagine it, a winding artery stretching from Edo, modern-day Tokyo, to Kyoto, edged with weathered tea houses, travelers' inns, shrines, and roadside gardens. In the gentle rain of spring, the stones glisten like quiet fish scales, and the air smells of wet bamboo, simmering rice, and drifting plum blossoms dot along. One misty bend in this road stands a small tea house with paper lanterns hanging from its eaves. Their glow is soft, more suggestion than light, like tiny moons drifting low to earth. You hear the slow tap of rain against wooden shingles, the distant call of a nightingale, the faint rustle of a traveller's sandal on the muddy path. The tea house belongs to a widow named Chio. Her presence is so calm that even the swallows nesting in the rafters pause to watch her movements, heads tilted in quiet reverence. Chio rises each morning before the pale fingers of dawn have touched the mist. She sits by a low brazier, heating water in an iron kettle, whose surface bears the gentle bloom of age, a fine grey patina, like the down of a dove. Steam drifts slowly upward, curling in slender threads toward the wooden beams overhead. In the quiet hours before travelers arrive, Chio tends to her small courtyard garden. There, moss grows thick around stepping stones, and tiny blue irises bloom beside a water basin carved from granite. She picks stray leaves from the moss, whispering small blessings under her breath as each is lifted away. Her old cat, Tama, trails behind her, paws silent as folded silk once the garden is in order. Chio prepares her tea implements, a shallow bamboo ladle, a small whisk carved from a single branch, bowls of pale celadon glaze, each one slightly different, each holding a secret history of guests who have held them with trembling or weary hands. The first guest of the day often arrives shyly, sliding open the door with a careful hand. Perhaps it is a weary merchant whose feet are blistered from the long road, or a young messenger bearing scrolls between provinces. Chio greets each with the same serene bow, her spine as straight as a reed. She offers them a damp cloth to clean their hands, a low cushion to rest their knees, and the soft hush of her tea room, a place where time slows until the dust of travel settles at the bottom of the heart. The walls of her tea room are simple, pale wood lattice, paper screens that glow softly when touched by morning light, and a single hanging scroll painted with a quiet moon above a lone pine. The scroll changes with the seasons, a plum blossom in February, drifting maples in October, always chosen with care to remind the guest of the moment's fragile beauty. Outside, along the Tokaido, travelers pass in endless slow rivers, porters carrying crates of silks and salted fish, samurai with swords wrapped against the damp, actors on tour, their faces powdered even beneath straw hats, pilgrims returning from shrines, rosaries clicking like distant rain. Inside Chio's tea house, the world holds its breath. She pours hot water into a bowl, stirs the powdered tea with delicate circles of her wrist, creating a soft green froth like the surface of a quiet pond. Her movements are slow enough that you can hear the subtle susurration of the whisk against the ceramic, a sound softer than moth wings, but somehow stronger than any spoken word. As the tea settles, Chio studies her guest's eyes. In them, she reads the silent letters of grief and longing, fatigue and fragile hope. She does not ask questions. The tea is the question and the answer both. When she slides the bowl toward the guest, Her hands pause just before release, as if asking, "Are you ready to hold the warmth?" Most are, though some hesitate, looking into the swirling green surface as if glimpsing a forgotten childhood dream. They drink, slowly, in small sips. The bitterness of the matcha gives way to a quiet sweetness that lingers on the tongue like a final word whispered in the dark. Chio watches, her own breath sinking with each sip. Once the tea is finished, she bows again, her forehead nearly touching the tatami mat. The guest rises slowly, limbs heavy with gratitude, and steps out into the pale morning fog, carrying the tea's warmth as an invisible lantern inside them. After each guest, Chio cleans the implements in silence. She wipes each bowl as if it were a newborn bird, each whisk as if it were a lock of hair from a loved one now lost to the waves. Between visitors, she tends to small tasks, mending a frayed hem in her kimono, feeding scraps of rice to Tama, or arranging a single sprig of plum blossom in a narrow-necked vase. She moves with the steady rhythm of tides against a sheltered cove, each gesture unhurried, each moment fully inhabited. In the afternoons, when the sun lifts and rain clouds drift like slow caravans across the sky, Chio sometimes steps onto the narrow porch. There, she sits on a low wooden bench, her hands folded in her lap, watching travelers make their slow, muddy progress along the road. A straw-hatted monk may pause to adjust his sandal. A mother might soothe a wailing child on her back. An old man might lean heavily on a twisted walking stick as he measures each footstep like a monk counting beads. She watches without judgment, her gaze gentle and vast. Her own losses have taught her that each soul carries an entire sea within them. Waves of joy, eddies of regret, sudden squalls of loneliness. Chio's late husband, Hiroshi, once walked this road many times as a paper merchant, selling calligraphy sheets to traveling poets and monks. After his death, she found his last bundle of papers carefully stored in a cedar box, their edges curled from years of damp journeys. She keeps that box near her futon, its scent of cedar rising faintly each night as she folds herself into sleep. Sometimes, after the final guest leaves, she lifts a sheet of that paper and writes poems in faint, wavering brushstrokes. The ink flows like a gentle night rain, the words echoing in the empty room long after the brush is laid aside. One evening, as twilight slips into the garden like a pale fox, a young ronin appears at her door. His straw hat is torn, his sleeves heavy with rainwater. He hesitates on the threshold, as though fearing he might disturb a shrine. Chio inclines her head and motions him inside. She offers him a towel for his hair, then guides him to a cushion near the hearth. He sits in silence, eyes downcast. Chio notices his hand trembling slightly as he accepts the bowl of tea. She understands without words. The weight of a sword is not only in its steel, but in the quiet rooms it leaves empty behind it. The ronin drinks, his breath catching on the rim of the bowl. A tear falls into the green foam, disappearing instantly. When he finishes, he sets the bowl down with reverence, as though returning a piece of his soul to the world. Chio bows deeply. The ronin rises, offering a single coin, which she accepts without counting. As he steps into the night, he hesitates at the door, turns once to bow, then vanishes into the deepening blue. Long after he is gone, Chio sits alone, cradling the bowl in her hands. She listens to the slow drip of water in the garden basin, to the distant clatter of a traveler's cart, to the hidden heartbeat of her own quiet strength. Above her, the swallows return to their nest, fluttering in soft spirals before settling under the eaves. Their tiny bodies tremble with each breath, as though even sleep requires an act of courage. The lamp flickers low, shadows gathering like gentle tides around her. Chio lowers the bowl, unfolds her old husband's cedar-scented paper, and begins. Another poem, her brush glides softly, words blooming like midnight flowers across the page. She writes of mist and silence, of travelers and ghosts, of swallows and tea that holds both bitterness and balm. Each line is a thread tying her to the night, to the road beyond, to every soul who passes in hushed devotion beneath her lanterns. Glow as she lays down her brush, she breathes out slowly. The air smells of wet earth, moss, and the faint memory of plum blossoms drifting in moonlight outside. The world continues its slow, echoing march. Inside, a single woman sits in perfect stillness, a lighthouse in human form, guiding lost hearts through the fog, one quiet bowl at a time. In this hush, we pause for now, feeling the warmth of her tea, the softness of rain on cedar, and the silent songs of swallows folding their wings into the night. Footsteps on wet stones, asterisk, welcome back, dear friend. Let your breathing slow even more now, sinking into the quiet rhythms of a faraway land. Your eyelids may feel heavier, like the moss-laden stones in Chio's garden, and that is exactly as it should be. The morning after the Ronin's visit arrives, wrapped in a thin veil of mist. In the courtyard garden, beads of dew tremble on iris petals, catching early light like tiny stars. A low breeze stirs the bamboo fence, creating a soft music only the attentive ear might catch. Chio rises before sunrise, as always, folding her futon with care, smoothing every crease as though she were preparing a guest's pillow. She lights a small stick of incense, cedar and sandalwood, and places it in a tiny clay holder shaped like a sleeping cat. The gentle smoke curls upward, as if searching for something beyond the paper-thin roof. Tama, her old cat, follows her into the kitchen. There, Chio prepares a small breakfast, pickled plum on rice, miso soup with seaweed, and a wedge of daikon radish. She eats slowly, each bite measured like a careful poem. Tama waits patiently at her side, eyes half closed in the rising warmth. After breakfast, Chio opens the front shutters of the tea house. Beyond the threshold, the Tokaido Road is waking. Porters load straw crates. A group of laughing children chase a hoop, and two elderly men lean against a cart, discussing weather and the price of millet. The morning smells of wet earth, boiled soybeans, and horse sweat. The first guests today are two sisters from Edo, traveling toward Kyoto to visit an ailing aunt. They arrive wrapped in traveling cloaks dyed a pale indigo, their hair pinned with bone combs polished to a soft sheen. They slip off their straw sandals at the threshold, arranging them neatly before stepping onto the tatami.chio, greets them with a deep bow, her hands folded lightly over her abdomen. She offers warm cloths to clean their hands and invites them to sit by the low brazier. The sisters look around with curious eyes, taking in the sparse scroll, the flower arrangement, the hush that seems to vibrate just below hearing. She prepares tea for them, her movements so slow that they seem to pause time itself. Each swirl of the whisk becomes an invitation to breathe, each soft click of the ladle against the rim a small drumbeat for the heart. As the sisters sip, they begin to speak in low voices. They talk of their father's garden, of carp leaping after falling plum blossoms, of the taste of cold persimmons on a hot afternoon. Their words float up and dissolve into the quiet air, like mist rising from a distant lake. Chio listens, nodding occasionally, but does not interrupt. Her role is not to fill the space, but to hold it open, a cup waiting to receive rain. When they finish, Chio offers a small tray of sweets, translucent yolk and jelly cut into squares, and tiny rice cakes dusted with kinako powder. The sisters' eyes brighten, and they share the sweets in quiet delight as they leave. They each bow deeply to Chio. One sister leaves a folded paper crane on the mat beside her cushion, a tiny origami bird with wings outstretched, ready to fly toward unseen skies. After they depart, Chio places the paper crane on the small altar she keeps for her husband. There it joins small offerings, a chipped porcelain bead, a dried persimmon slice, a sprig of pine. Each token is a silent note in the symphony of her days. Outside, the road grows busier. A horse-drawn cart creaks past, its driver calling out warnings to children darting in and out of its path. Vendors hawk steamed buns and pickled vegetables, their voices rising and falling like a wandering melody. In this gentle chaos, Chio remains a still point, moving with patient grace as she cleans bowls, sweeps the garden path, and sets fresh water in the stone basin. She watches a line of ants cross a bamboo pole, pausing to trace their tiny, determined journey with her eyes. Around midday, a merchant arrives, his robe dusty, his sandals worn thin at the toes. He is delivering tea leaves from Yuji, a prized variety known for its subtle sweetness and mossy undertones. Chio receives him with a respectful bow, offering a cup of barley tea to ease his thirst. They exchange few words. Instead, they let the rustle of paper-wrapped parcels and the soft creak of the scale speak for them. The merchant weighs out a measure of tea leaves, his hands surprisingly delicate for a man who spends his days lifting heavy bundles. When he leaves, Chio opens the package, inhaling deeply. The scent is rich and layered. Green fields after rain, the faint bitterness of wild herbs, the sweetness of new buds. She closes her eyes, savoring the memory of Yuji Hills that she has never seen but imagines vividly, rolling mists over endless tea terraces, morning drizzles, catching spider webs like tiny pearls. She stores the tea in a dark ceramic jar, sealing it carefully with a waxed paper disc. This tea is reserved for special guests, those who arrive carrying invisible burdens, too heavy for words. In the late afternoon, as the sun stretches its golden fingers across the road, a group of traveling performers stop at her tea house. They are on their way to a festival in Nagoya, their robes bright with stitched dragons and cranes. Their laughter bursts like fireworks, echoing down the narrow road. They enter with cheerful clamor, laying their woven hats and drums on the tatami. Chio welcomes them with quiet composure, bowing deeply before slipping away to prepare tea. For these guests, she chooses a more robust blend, whisking it with slightly stronger strokes to match their boisterous energy. She serves them quickly but gracefully, matching the rhythm of their lively stories about windstorms that nearly toppled stage wagons, forgotten props, and rival performers. As they drink, they begin to play small flutes and tap tiny hand drums, turning the tea house into a transient theater. Chio does not discourage them. She moves about, replenishing bowls and quietly tidying, letting their music swirl around her like a spring breeze stirring fallen petals. When they finally depart, they leave behind a small mask carved from lightweight cedar, a fox spirit with one mischievous eye closed. Chio places it near the paper crane on her altar, a reminder of fleeting joy, of laughter that arrives uninvited but leaves an indelible echo. Evening draws near, and the sky deepens into smoky violet. The last of the travelers hurry along the road, eager to reach the next post town before full darkness drapes its heavy cloak across the mountains. Chio extinguishes the garden lanterns one by one, each small flame sighing into the dusk. She sweeps the porch, the sound of straw bristles echoing softly against the wooden boards. In the tea room, she straightens the scroll, refills the vase with fresh water, and carefully wipes each tatami mat with a damp cloth scented faintly with pine. Each stroke is like a prayer, each corner a note in her ongoing symphony of silence. When the work is done, Chio pours herself a single bowl of tea, a humble blend tonight, just enough warmth to cradle the edges of her mind. She sits on the porch, Tama curled at her feet, and watches as stars begin to bloom one by one across the ink-blue sky in the hush of night. She can almost hear her husband's footsteps returning on the road, the soft brush of his robe, the click of his wooden getter sandals on stone. She closes her eyes, her fingers wrapping gently around the warm bowl. In her imagination, he sits beside her, murmuring small jokes about the slowness of turtles or the stubbornness of the old innkeeper down the road. She laughs softly, the sound barely rising above the cicada's hum. A sudden breeze stirs the hanging wind chime by the door. Its delicate notes ripple out into the night, a song for the moon and all the unseen travelers moving quietly beyond the tea-house gates. As the final stars settle into place, Chio rises, places the empty bowl beside the doorway, and folds her hands in her lap. She looks out one last time at the sleeping road, the bamboo shadows, the pale gleam of dew returning to the moss dot inside. The paper screens glow softly in the moonlight, casting shifting shapes like gentle ghosts moving through a dream. Tonight, she will write another poem on her husband's paper, the ink shimmering like midnight water under a lantern's glow. Perhaps she will write of the sisters and their plum conversations, or the fox mask's sly smile, or the musicians' drifting flutes. Perhaps she will write only of the hush, the pauses, the quiet pools of unspoken tenderness that flow between each guest and herself. In this tender, moonlit hush, we rest for now, breathing in the cedar-scented night, the echo of footfalls on wet stones, and the soft lullaby of an old widow's tea-house, patiently waiting for the next wandering soul. Lanterns for the lost asterisk, welcome back. Settle yourself a little more deeply now. Imagine the weight of a soft quilt over your chest, the warmth of a small hearth flickering nearby. Tonight, we walk the final winding path beside Chio, beneath a sky painted with moonlight and drifting clouds. It is late autumn on the Tokaido Road. The first hints of frost whisper through the bamboo groves, and the chrysanthemums in Chio's courtyard have begun to droop, their petals pale and bruised by the cold. A thin fog moves among the stones each dawn, curling around the tea-house as if it, too, seeks warmth and solace. On these chilly mornings, Chio rises before the rooster's cry, slipping her cold feet into straw slippers. She pulls a faded indigo shawl around her shoulders and makes her first slow circuit of the tea-house. She checks the garden gate, sweeps fallen leaves from the porch, and lights a single lantern above the door. Its glow is modest but steady, a small promise to travelers wandering in the grey dawn. Inside, she kindles the hearth in the tea room, the soft crackle of fire greeting the tatami mats like an old friend. The iron kettle soon begins its low, comforting hum. Steam coils upward, carrying the scent of pine ash and old cedar beams into the upper corners of the room. As she waits for the first guest, Chio prepares a tray with meticulous grace. She arranges a tiny dish of pickled mountain vegetables, a small slice of dried persimmon, and a single pale rice cake shaped like a plum blossom. Each item is chosen not only for taste, but for its quiet poetry, a reminder that even small gestures can hold entire worlds. One morning, as the sky turns a soft peach above the distant mountains, a lone woman approaches the tea house. She wears a travel-worn kimono the color of river stones, her hair bound in a simple cloth wrap. A woven basket hangs from her arm, filled with dry sticks and broken roots. Her steps are slow and measured, as though she carries a lifetime on. Her back, Chio greets her at the door with a silent bow. The traveler bows in return, her eyes glistening with a quiet fatigue. As she enters, she pauses to slide off her sandals, tucking them carefully beside the door before stepping onto the soft tatami. Chio offers a warm cloth, which the woman accepts with trembling fingers. When she lowers her hands, she gazes around the tea room, her eyes resting on the scroll, the simple flower arrangement, the low brazier with its tender flame. The woman speaks in a hushed, hesitant voice. She is a gatherer from a mountain village beyond Hakani. She says, living alone since her husband was lost to an avalanche many winters ago. She sells small bundles of firewood and wild herbs, enough to keep rice in her pot and tea leaves in. Her jar, as she talks, her voice falters and halts, like a lantern flickering in the wind. Chio listens without interruption, her head bowed slightly, her hands folded in her lap. Her presence is a listening bowl, wide, deep, and endlessly patient. Chio rises to prepare tea, her movements unhurried and liquid like moonlight drifting. Across still water, she chooses the special UGT, opening the ceramic jar with a soft exhale, as though revealing a secret only she and the mountain woman will share. As she whisked the tea, Chio's arms form graceful arcs, her breath steady, her focus absolute. Each swirl gathers not only the powdered green tea, but also the guest's silent grief, folding it into something gentle, something that might be carried a little easier when the woman returns to the road, when she serves the bowl. The woman accepts it with both hands, her head lowering in gratitude. She drinks in slow, reverent sips, her eyes softening, her shoulders releasing an unseen burden. A single tear slides down her cheek, disappearing into the fabric of her kimono. Chio offers no words, her silence a tender embrace, her stillness a salve dot after finishing the tea. The woman reaches into her basket and retrieves a small, intricately carved wooden amulet. A fox spirit curled into a sleeping ball, its tail wrapped protectively around its nose. She places it on the mat before Chio and bows deeply, her forehead nearly touching the floor. Chio accepts the gift with a bow of equal depth, her eyes closing briefly in a silent blessing. The woman gathers her basket, bows once more, and steps back into the grey morning. As she disappears into the fog, her silhouette flickers like a fading ink brushstroke. Absorbed by the road's endless hush, Chio holds the fox amulet for a long time, turning it in her palms, feeling the warmth left by the traveler's hands. She places it on her altar beside the paper crane and the fox mask, the quiet gallery of stories woven from all the souls who have passed through her door. Later that day, a group of young apprentices arrive, laughing and stumbling into the tea house. Their hands are calloused from carrying rice bales and buckets of water at a nearby inn. Their laughter fills the tea room, echoing against the paper screens like a festival drumbeat. Chio welcomes them with her serene smile, seating them in a wide circle around the brazier. She offers a simpler tea, more robust and earthy, to match their rough energy. As she pours, they tell exaggerated stories of their overseer's temper, of mischievous cats stealing fish from the kitchen, of secret moonlit swims in the river. Behind the inn, the apprentices mimic their elders with dramatic gestures, and Chio laughs softly, a rare sound, gentle as wind through bamboo. It rises, surprising even her, and the apprentices pause, eyes wide, before joining in with renewed vigor. When they leave, they offer her a handful of wild chestnuts, shiny and firm, gathered on their way down the road. Chio accepts the gift, bowing deeply, her laughter still echoing in the warm shadows. As dusk approaches, she roasts the chestnuts on a small iron grate above the brazier, their skins cracking gently, releasing a sweet, earthy aroma. She eats them slowly, each bite a quiet memory of the apprentice's laughter, the echo of shared warmth lingering in the tea room's corners. That evening, a gentle rain begins to fall, drumming softly on the tiled roof. Chio lights her lanterns one by one, their glow pooling across the wet stones outside. Like pale moons reflected in a mountain lake, she arranges her tea implements for the next morning, each bowl perfectly aligned, each whisk checked for splinters, each ladle polished to a dull glow. She wipes the scroll gently, as though brushing snow from an old friend's shoulder. When all is ready, she steps onto the porch, pulling her shawl closer against the chill. The rain has gathered into small streams, weaving among the stones, carrying stray petals and fallen leaves on quiet journeys toward the unseen sea. She listens to the rain's tender voice, to the distant hush of passing carts, and the occasional clop of a horse's hooves echoing like a heartbeat in the fog. Chio's thoughts drift to her husband. 2 nights when they sat together, listening to the same rain, sharing small bowls of warm sake, their laughter rising like steam into the rafters. She imagines his hand resting lightly on hers, his voice low and steady, telling her stories of distant poets and hidden valleys. She closes her eyes, letting the memories wash over her like a warm spring bath. When she opens them, she notices a faint glow beyond the garden gate. A lone traveler approaches, carrying a paper lantern that sways in the rain-soaked wind. The traveler pauses at the gate, bowing deeply before stepping onto the path. Chio watches as the figure draws closer. The lantern's glow illuminating a pale, exhausted face. The traveler looks up, meeting her gaze with an expression that is at once weary and relieved, as though the tea house itself were a lighthouse guiding them through a long, stormy passage. Without a word, Chio motions them inside, holding the door wide as they slip past, dripping rainwater onto the polished wooden floor. She offers a dry cloth, a place by the brazier, a bowl of hot tea. As the traveler drinks, Chio sits across from them, her shawl draped softly around her shoulders. She watches the rain slide down the paper screens, each droplet tracing a slow, deliberate path toward the earth. The tea house is silent except for the rain, the crackle of the brazier, and the traveler's slow, shivering breaths. In that hush, something unspoken passes between them. A recognition, a shared understanding of loneliness, of long roads and lost lanterns. After the tea is finished, the traveler stands, bowing low. They leave the lantern behind, placing it gently beside the door before stepping back into the rain. Chio watches them disappear down the glistening road, their figure merging with the moonlit mist. She picks up the lantern, its paper sides painted with tiny plum blossoms and cranes. In flight, she lights it anew and places it on the porch, its glow joining her own small lanterns, creating a constellation to guide any other lost souls who might wander past in the night. Inside, she gathers her brush and her husband's cedar-scented paper. She writes a new poem, her brush moving in slow, breathing strokes. Lantern for the lost moon weeps on bamboo leaves, tea steam. Silent heart. When the ink has dried, she folds the paper and places it beneath her pillow. As she prepares for bed, she pauses one last time at the door, gazing out at the softly glowing lanterns, at the rain, at the pale shimmer of dawn beginning its slow approach beyond the mountains. She lies down on her futon, drawing her thin quilt up to her chin, her hair spilling across the pillow like black silk. Tamer curls at her feet, his breath small and steady. In the stillness of the tea house, with lanterns keeping silent vigil outside, Chayo drifts into sleep. Her dreams are filled with distant voices on foggy roads, with travelers whose burdens she carried if only for a moment. Story 3. Wash basins and whispered oaths, the midwives of Ottoman Istanbul braided hair. At dawn, asterisk, good evening again, dear friend. You've come so far along these gentle paths. Feel your breath soften and lengthen as we step now into the dawn-lit courtyards of another world. This time, we find ourselves in Ottoman Istanbul during the late 17th century. The city hums with layers upon layers of sound, the creak of cartwheels over cobblestones, the soft slosh of water carried from fountains, the distant, mournful call to prayer echoing from slender minarets as first light brushes the domes of countless mosques. In a narrow alleyway lined with rose bushes and terracotta pots, a low wooden door creaks open. Behind it lives Ache, a midwife whose touch is as gentle as rosewater and as steady as the Bosphorus current. Ache wakes long before the city stirs, before bread ovens are lit or fishermen push their narrow boats from the shore. She lights a small oil lamp beside her sleeping mat, its flame quivering like a pulse in the dim room. Her hair, long and black with streaks of early silver, is carefully combed and then braided tightly, a ritual of quiet discipline passed down from her grandmother. The braid is not merely for tidiness, it is believed to protect her from wandering spirits and ill luck that might linger in the thresholds between birth and death. As she works, she whispers prayers in Turkish, each word slipping into the darkness like a thread sewing closed a wound. She then prepares a copper basin, pouring warm water from an earthen jug. With a square of linen, she washes her face and hands, pausing now and then to look at the moon's fading reflection in the water. The basin holds more than water. It carries memories, the countless new lives she has welcomed, the silent goodbyes to infants who never took a full breath, the sighs of mothers both relieved and afraid. Ike's small home smells of lavender, frankincense, and aged cloth. Herbs hang from the rafters in thick bunches, sage, mint, rosemary, and a bitter local plant known to ease bleeding. A basket of cotton swaddles sits near the hearth, carefully folded and softened by countless washings in the cool streams of the city's hills. When she finishes her morning cleansing, she sips a small cup of thick, dark coffee, strong enough to leave a lingering warmth in her bones. Sometimes, if she feels the day's weight gathering early, she drops a small cube of rose-flavored sugar into her cup, letting its sweetness bloom slowly as the first shafts of sunlight spill over tiled rooftops. A knock comes at her door. Ache knows this rhythm intimately. Every knock holds a different urgency, A rapid, uneven beat signals a birth progressing too quickly. A slow, trembling tap means an older mother fearful of her body's strength. A firm, steady rap suggests a household prepared and calm. This morning, it is a gentle, almost apologetic knock. She opens the door to find a young servant girl, her cheeks flushed, her headscarf slipping from her braid. The girl lowers her eyes and murmurs that her mistress, a merchant's wife in the next quarter, has begun her labor. She offers a small pouch of walnuts in payment, a humble token in a city where money flows like the sea, but seldom finds its way to midwives. Ake nods without hesitation. She pulls on her long cotton cloak, wraps a thin scarf around her shoulders, and gathers her birthing satchel, an aged leather bag containing linen cloths, olive oil, herbal tinctures, curved silver scissors, a fine needle, and a vial of pomegranate. Seeds for strengthening the mother's heart as they step into the alley. The city feels like it is breathing in a long, slow dream. Cats slink between doorways, pausing to watch as they pass. The scent of morning bread drifts from a nearby bakery, warm and golden. The narrow streets echo with soft footfalls and the faint tinkle of bells from distant donkeys carrying milk jugs. They wind through lanes that twist like threads of silk, past archways heavy with vines and wooden shutters painted in faded blues and greens. Each corner reveals small altars tucked into walls, their candles flickering weakly in the dawn breeze. Arriving at the merchant's house, Ake is greeted by two older women, the mother and aunt of the laboring woman, who immediately guide her inside. Their eyes flicker with equal parts hope and fear, hands fluttering like doves at the edge of flight. The birthing room is dim, curtains drawn tightly to keep out the chill. Braziers glow softly at the corners, their coals releasing a sweet resinous scent meant to calm the spirit. The mother-to-be lies on a low bed, her knees drawn up, her breathing ragged and quick. Sweat glistens on her forehead like dew on rose petals. Ake moves to her side without speaking, taking the woman's wrist gently in her palm. She feels the pulse, thready, quick, but steady enough. She speaks her name softly, calling her. Back from the haze of pain, the mother's eyes flutter open, finding Ike's calm gaze, and her breathing begins to slow, each exhale sinking deeper into the mattress. From her satchel, Ake retrieves a small cloth soaked in rose water and presses it to the mother's lips, then dabs her forehead. She murmurs old lullabies, fragments of songs older than the empire itself, songs that weave comfort into the very walls, between contractions. She encourages slow sips of pomegranate syrup, each drop a ruby promise of strength. The older women whisper prayers in the corners, their voices weaving into the rhythm of the mother's breath. Hours stretch and curl like smoke. Outside, the street grows lively, merchants calling out fish prices, children playing tag with stray dogs, the midday muezzin's voice rising over the domes. Inside, time becomes viscous, each moment held carefully in Ike's steady hands. Finally, a sharp cry splits the hush. The mother's face twists, her fingers gripping the sheet with all the force of a storm-tossed mast. Ake supports her firmly, whispering, "Now, dear one, breathe with me. Let the river flow." With one last surge, a new voice enters, the world thin, reedy, yet piercing as a minaret's call. Ake lifts the baby gently, her own breath catching in her throat. A girl, tiny fists curled, mouth searching, legs kicking like a swimmer tasting sunlight for the first time. She cleans the baby with warm cloths, then places her on the mother's chest, guiding tiny lips to the breast. The mother's eyes flood with tears that slide into her hairline, and her shoulders sink into the bed, her whole being softening as she gathers her daughter close. Ache kneels beside them, smoothing the mother's hair, humming softly. She then cuts and ties the cord, her fingers deft and unhurried, as though she has all the time in the world. The older women approach, their faces dissolving into grateful sobs as they lean in to bless the baby. Once the room settles into a quiet glow, Ache moves to clean her tools. She wraps her linen cloths, wipes the silver scissors until they gleam faintly in the low light, and packs them away. She takes her time, each motion deliberate, reverent, an intimate dance between life, breath, and the thin veil that separates this world from the next. Before leaving, she offers the mother a small bundle of rosemary tied with blue thread. For strength, she murmurs, her voice low and steady. The mother clutches it to her chest, as though holding a piece of dawn itself. Stepping outside, Ache breathes in the city's midday life, the scent of roasted chestnuts, sea brine from the Golden Horn, and the fleeting sweetness of blooming jasmine. She feels the ache in her knees, the slight tremor in her hands, but also a deep warmth blossoming in her chest. She begins her slow walk home, pausing to buy a handful of fresh figs from a vendor whose son she once delivered under a sky heavy with winter rain. They exchange a nod, a silent acknowledgement that needs no words. In her alleyway, a neighbor's grandmother waves from her doorway, lifting a small glass of tea in greeting. Ache smiles, her eyes crinkling softly. At home, she removes her cloak and sets her satchel in its usual corner. She pours water into her copper basin once more, watching the ripples spread, catching her tired reflection. As she washes, she traces the fine lines of her face, each one a record of sleepless nights, difficult births, whispered oaths, and tender goodbyes. She braids her hair again, even though the day is far from over. The ritual grounds her, binds her spirit back to her body after walking so closely with the threshold of life. Finally, she sits on her cushion by the hearth, warming her palms over a small brazier. She nibbles a fig slowly, savoring its honeyed sweetness as the city hums and breathes around her. Outside, a neighbor's child begins to sing, the wavering tune floating through the alley like a stray thread of silk. Ache closes her eyes and listens, her breath slowing, her heart echoing the child's gentle, uneven melody. In this quiet, she rests, not in sleep, but in a deeper, more ancient stillness, known only to those who have cradled both first cries and final sighs in the same careful hands. Henna on fingertips, asterisk, good evening once again. Your breathing is steady now, each inhale softer, each exhale slower. Imagine the faint warmth of a hearth at your feet, the sound of a distant lute, the slow flicker of an oil lamp painting shadows on the walls. Let us return now to Ache, who continues her quiet journey beneath the layered skies of Istanbul. The days lengthen, stretching into warm afternoons where the scent of jasmine seeps into every courtyard. In Ike's narrow alleyway, roses have begun to bloom again, their heads heavy, leaning over clay pots like old women sharing secrets. One morning, Ache wakes before the roosters. The air is cool and damp, scented faintly of sea salt and earth. She rises, braids her hair carefully, and washes her hands in her copper basin. As she dries them on a sun-bleached cloth, a soft knocking echoes at her door. Outside stands Hassa, a young woman from a neighboring quarter. Her eyes are wide, shimmering with worry. In her hands, she carries a small basket lined with embroidered cloth, inside. A handful of rose petals, a few almonds, and a scrap of yellow silk. Hesa bows deeply, her forehead nearly touching the threshold. She hesitates, then finally speaks. Her sister-in-law, Zeynep, is in labor for her first child. The family is worried. The pregnancy had been difficult, and Zeynep has been weak for months. Ake accepts the basket with a gentle nod. She slips on her worn cloak, loops her satchel over her shoulder, and steps into the waking streets. As they walk, the city is stirring to life. Men rinse figs in street fountains. A fisherman mends nets on the curb. Women shuffle rugs outside to beat the dust into morning air. Smoke curls from flat clay roofs, carrying the promise of lentil soups and honey-drizzled flatbreads. They arrive at Zeynep's home, a 2-story wooden house with latticed windows, vines curling along the walls. Inside, the atmosphere is tense. Women crowd the hall, whispering prayers, their fingers moving rhythmically along amber prayer beads. In the birthing room, Zeynep lies propped against folded quilts, her breathing shallow, her hair plastered too, her forehead in dark strands. She glances up as Ake enters, her eyes wide and glassy like a moon caught in a pond's ripples. Ake moves to her side, gently taking her wrist to feel her pulse. It is weak and irregular, fluttering like a trapped bird. Ake presses her lips together, her mind weaving possibilities, a tea of mint and honey, a poultice of yarrow. Careful pressure points to coax the body into opening. From her satchel, she pulls out a slender flask of olive oil, infused with wormwood and marjoram. She rubs a small amount onto her palms, warming it between her hands, and begins to massage Zeynep's belly in slow, circular motions. Each circle a prayer, each pause a silent promise. She hums softly, a tune older than the empire itself, echoing from Anatolian villages and the high mountain meadows beyond. The rhythm settles the women gathered nearby, their worried chatter turning into hushed sighs. Hours stretch and shift like drifting veils. Outside, the call to noon prayer curls through the streets. Zeynep moans, her face straining as each wave of pain sweeps through her. Ake holds her hand firmly, guiding her breathing with a steady cadence. In, slow as the Bosphorus tide. Out, gentle as a drifting leaf. At one point, Zeynep's strength falters, and her head slumps sideways. A murmur of alarm spreads among the women. Ake leans in, pressing her lips to Zeynep's ear, whispering her name, calling her back. She fans her face with a small silk handkerchief, sprinkles rose water across her forehead, and presses her thumb to a small pressure point behind her ear. Gradually, Zeynep's eyes flutter open. She gasps, then clenches her teeth as a strong contraction takes hold. Ake nods, her own breath deepening in sympathy, as though the labor echoes in her own bones. Finally, after many hours, Zeynep's cries change in pitch, no longer desperate, but urgent, powerful, as though a river had finally broken through winter ice. Ake kneels, ready to receive the baby, her fingers steady despite the sweat dripping down her temples. In a final surge, the baby slips into Ike's hands. A boy, strong and vigorous, his first wail echoing sharply in the small room, a defiant announcement to the world. The women erupt in relief, some laughing, some crying, others raising hands in spontaneous prayer. Ake wipes the baby gently, wraps him in a cotton swaddle, and places him on Zeynep's chest. The young mother sobs, her hands trembling as they trace her son's downy head. Outside, a neighbor's rooster crows again, as if offering a ceremonial flourish to this small miracle. Once the room quiets, Ache tends to the mother carefully, feeding her spoonfuls of warm clove tea, massaging her legs to keep her blood moving. She then checks the baby's breath, eyes, limbs, each movement deliberate and gentle, like a potter smoothing clay. When she is satisfied, she steps back and lets Zeynep's family crowd around, each face alight with awe. Later, as Ache washes, her hands at a brass basin in the corner, one of the older women approaches. She carries a small earthen bowl filled with henna paste. Without a word, she takes Ike's right hand and begins to spread the henna across her fingertips and palm. The warm paste seeps into the fine lines of Ike's skin, filling each groove with a dark promise. The gesture is a silent blessing, a way of marking her as a conduit of life and protection. As the henna dries, Ache sits in a small corner by the window. She watches the sunlight shift across the room, catching floating motes of dust that dance like tiny spirits. Her mind wanders to other births, a child born during a thunderstorm, a girl who came into the world as snow piled on the eaves, a baby whose first breath was a gasp under a moonlit sky. The henna hardens and cracks, leaving deep orange patterns on her fingers. It is as if the stories of all the mothers and children have been etched into her skin, a living manuscript of beginnings and farewells. As the family offers her a meal, rice pilaf with roasted lamb, pickled vegetables, sweet dates, Ache eats slowly, savoring each grain, each tender bite. The warmth of the food sinks into her, fortifying her spirit for the winding journey home. When she finally stands to leave, Zeynep's mother presses a small cloth pouch into her hand. Inside, dried lavender, a few coins, and a piece of rock. Sugar Ache bows deeply, tucking the gift into her cloak. Outside, dusk has begun its slow descent. Lanterns flicker to life along the narrow streets, casting long, trembling shadows on the cobblestones as she walks. The henna on her fingers glows faintly in the lantern light. Each step a quiet echo of her whispered prayers. A stray cat follows her for a while, weaving between her ankles. When she pauses, it rubs against her leg before darting away into a side alley. Swallowed by the dark, Ache stops at a public fountain, dipping her hands in the cold water, watching the henna dye curl away in orange wisps. The water carries the color downstream, as though dispersing pieces of her journey into the city's vast, hidden arteries. She continues on, her steps steady, the weight of her satchel balanced against her hip. Each street she passes holds a memory, a courtyard where she once delivered twins in the rain, a fig tree under which she comforted a grieving grandmother, a rooftop where she once watched comets trail across the night sky with a child she helped bring into the world. Reaching her own alleyway, she bows her head in gratitude. The roses, heavy with dew, lean over as if to greet her. The scent of lavender drifts from her doorway, welcoming her home. Inside, she lights a small oil lamp, its flame a trembling but steadfast companion. She unpacks her satchel carefully, cleaning each tool as though cradling a newborn. The scissors gleam, the linen cloths soften under her fingers. When her work is done, she seats herself near the hearth, a small clay cup of licorice root tea. Warming her hands, she watches the flame, seeing in its flicker all the fragile, luminous moments she has carried, the cries, the songs, the laughter, the final silences. Her head bows forward slightly, eyelids heavy. In this hush, her breathing deepens, merging with the ancient rhythms of the city outside. Perhaps tonight she will dream of moonlit courtyards, of mothers' trembling smiles, of tiny hands curling round her finger. Perhaps she will drift beyond the domes and minarets, across the dark, starlit Bosphorus, into a night so deep it feels like a cradle. Here, in this silent, sacred warmth, we rest beside her. We listen to her heartbeat echoing faintly in the soft currents of sleep, in the hush of roses swaying against moon-washed walls. Shadows of the Hammam asterisk, welcome back, gentle friend. Let your shoulders soften now. Let your breathing grow slower still. You are standing again in Istanbul's winding heart, where the call to prayer curls around domes like mist and every alleyway hums with secrets. Tonight, we drift with ache through steam and candlelight into the hushed chambers of a women's HAM. It is late spring. The air outside shimmers with warmth, and fig trees press their broad leaves against the lattice. Windows. Inside the hammam, a different world unfolds. Steam rises in pale, dreamy veils. Warm water trickles down marble basins, sounding like whispered secrets in the dark. Ache steps inside, her cloak slipping from her shoulders. She is greeted by the keeper of the hammam, an old friend named Fatma. Their eyes meet with a softness, born of many shared dawns and dusks. The hammam is quiet at this hour, visited mostly by elderly women and young brides preparing for their first child. Steam clings to every surface, painting slow-moving ghosts across the high, domed ceilings. Light filters through small glass windows above, turning the steam into rivers of silver and pearl. Fatma brings ache, a basin of warm water infused with rose petals and orange blossom. Ache lowers her hands first, watching the petals drift around her fingers. She then dips her arms, her forearms marked faintly by henna from recent blessings. Each pattern a quiet chapter in her long, living story. As she washes, ache feels. Each drop slide across her skin, carrying away the weight of countless births, the echoes of new cries and final sighs. The water in this sacred place is more than cleansing. It is a return, a silken reunion with the hidden currents of life. After washing, she moves to the hot marble slab at the center of the room. Here, she lies down slowly, letting warmth seep into her bones. Fatma joins her with a coarse keys mitt, beginning to scrub Ike's back with long, sweeping strokes. Each stroke is a kind of prayer, a silent invocation to release sorrow and gather strength. The two women do not speak, yet their silence is rich with the softness of shared grief and joy, of hands that have held life's beginning and its slow, quiet fading dot above them. Beads of condensation drip from the dome, striking the marble with soft, rhythmical taps, like a rain that only the stones can hear. When the scrubbing is done, Fatma brings a pail of cool water and pours it gently over Ike's head and shoulders. The sudden chill is sharp but exhilarating, like stepping through a moonlit waterfall into another world. Ike's breath catches, then flows out in a long, relieved sigh. She sits up, hair clinging to her back, the edges of her spirit beginning to soften and drift. Fatma wraps a fresh linen cloth around her shoulders and guides her to a corner to rest. There, other women are gathered, an old widow with silver hair pinned in an intricate knot, a young wife pressing a pomegranate flower to her cheek, a grandmother, humming a lullaby as she soaks her feet. They exchange slow nods, each one acknowledging Ike's presence without words. They sip sweetened sherbet from small glass cups, flavored with sour cherry and hibiscus. The drink is cold and tart, a sharp contrast to the hammam's heavy warmth. Ache sips hers slowly, the sweetness moving through her veins like a gentle stream winding through a garden at dusk. In this space, burdens are left at the threshold. Troubles are melted in steam, wrung out in sweat, washed away in water. Each woman's scars and sorrows become translucent, shared among the droplets clinging to the walls. Fatma begins to sing an old Anatolian folk song, her voice rising and falling in soft waves. One woman joins in, then another, until the room echoes with a quiet weaving melody, a lullaby for the soul rather than the body. Ike's lips move silently with them, the words slipping from her memory into the warm air, like drifting petals. As the song fades, the women fall into an easy stillness. Outside, the afternoon sun begins to tilt westward, gilding the tops of minarets and turning narrow alleys into rivers of gold. Ache stands, her limbs heavy with warmth and release. Fatma hands her a small bundle inside, a sprig of rosemary, a fig wrapped in a rose petal, and a small clay bead shaped like a sleeping cat. These tokens are meant to carry peace home with her, small anchors to the softness she has gathered here. She dresses slowly, feeling each layer of her clothing like a gentle embrace. When she steps outside, the breeze feels new against her freshly scrubbed skin. The scent of warm stone, blooming jasmine, and distant spices curls around her, weaving her back into the city's living tapestry. She begins the slow walk home, her bundle clutched close to her chest. As she passes a public fountain, she pauses to watch a young girl fill a jug, her thin arms straining under the weight. Ache steps forward, steadying the jug with one hand and patting the girl's shoulder with the other. The girl beams, her eyes bright as spring rain. Moving on, Ache passes a narrow archway where cats sleep in sun-warmed piles, tails twitching in dream. Beyond, a shoemaker repairs sandals under a canopy of grapevines, humming a soft tune. An old man sells roasted chestnuts on a corner, the shells popping softly like distant sparrows. She feels these tiny lives brush against her spirit like silk threads. Each moment holds her gently, offering small reminders of why she rises before dawn, why she answers every trembling knock, why she cradles each life so carefully, reaching her home. She pushes open the wooden door and steps inside. The room greets her with its familiar scent of lavender and old cedar. Sunlight slants across the floor, catching the edge of her wash basin and turning it into a shallow bowl of light. She sets down her bundle on a low shelf and carefully unties it. She places the rosemary in a small ceramic vase, the fig on a plate, beside the hearth, and the clay bead in her palm. She traces its contours, feeling the curled back and tucked paws of the tiny cat sitting down. She closes her eyes and breathes deeply. Her mind drifts through the day's memories, the warmth of the hammam, the softness of women's songs, the cool sherbet sliding across her tongue. Slowly, these images dissolve into a gentle haze, like ink fading in water. She rises once more. To prepare her tools, she lays out her linen cloths and her silver scissors, inspecting each for wear. She sharpens a small needle, oils a pair of wooden clamps, and checks her precious bottle of rose water. Each item is laid down with ceremony, as though preparing an offering to the unseen forces that govern life and death. When everything is in its place, she lights a small oil lamp, its flame quiet and unwavering. She writes a few lines in a private ledger, a collection of quiet notations and observations that only she understands. The ink glides across the page, each character a small release of thought and memory. As dusk deepens outside, The call to evening prayer spills through the city, a low, undulating song that curls into every crevice and courtyard. Ache sits still, her gaze resting on the flickering lamp, her breathing merging with the distant echoes. Perhaps tonight she will dream of gentle waters and rose-scented steam. Perhaps she will wander the hammam again in her mind, trailing her, fingers along warm marble and hearing the soft rise of women's songs. She moves to her sleeping mat, drawing a quilt of pale indigo over her shoulders. Her fingers, still faintly tinted from henna, rest lightly over her chest as she closes her eyes. The lamp's light dances against the walls, painting fleeting shapes that rise and fall like drifting spirits. Outside, the last merchants close their stalls, cats weave among market refuse, and the Bosphorus laps quietly against the stones. Ike's breath slows. In the deep hush of her little room, it almost sounds like the distant pulse of a sleeping city, the shared, slow heartbeat of thousands of lives drifting into dreams. Tonight, she is just another gentle ripple in that vast, moonlit sea of sleep. Another hidden flame flickering softly in the tapestry of Istanbul's long, tangled night. And here, we pause together, wrapped in her warmth, drifting beyond words, beyond lantern glow, into the calmest folds of the night. And now, let's drift into a new corner of forgotten history. Story 4. Lemon rinds and veiled lanterns, the laundry girls of Edos, floating world threads in the morning mist. Asterisk, good evening again, gentle traveler. Welcome back beneath your soft blanket, your breathing quiet and steady as we prepare to wander into another tender corner of forgotten history. Tonight, we drift far east to Edo, the bustling city we now call Tokyo. During the late 18th century, close your eyes and imagine narrow wooden bridges arching over misty canals where water lilies float in pale clusters and the morning fog clings to low-hanging willow branches. Imagine the distant, rhythmic chant of boatmen pushing long poles into the water, the creak of lantern-lit houseboats as they sway in the dawn. In this floating world, Ukiyo, as it was called, everything feels like a fleeting dream. Paintings, poems, secret meetings in tea houses, and laughter echoing down lantern-lit alleys. But behind this shimmering world of kabuki actors and courtesans, a quieter story unfolds. The tireless work of laundry girls, whose hands stitched and scrubbed the hidden heartbeats of the city. You meet her first as a silhouette, a faint outline. In the mist, a young woman named Kyo. Her hair is pinned in a simple style, wrapped in a faded indigo cloth. Her kimono is patched at the elbows and smells faintly of river moss and soap root, before dawn even hints at the horizon. Kyo rises from her narrow futon, her breath curling in the cold room. She slides open the wooden shutters slowly, careful, not to wake her grandmother and younger brother. A thin slice of moon still hangs above the rooftops, and the lanterns outside sway gently, each carrying a protective charm against restless spirits. Kyo tiptoes across the tatami floor, her feet barely whispering. She kneels at a shallow basin to splash her face, gasping softly as the cold water shocks her awake. She rubs her cheeks briskly, the water dripping down her neck and soaking into her collar. Beside the basin, she has left a small wooden tray, a single pickled plum, a bowl of leftover rice, and a small sliver of dried fish. She eats slowly, savoring each bite, knowing that it must carry her through long hours beside the river. As she finishes, she wraps a worn scarf around her neck and gathers her tools, a bundle of soap root, a heavy bamboo paddle, and a length of rope for binding cloth. She ties her apron tight across her chest, checking that the knots are secure. Her fingers moving quickly from muscle memory. Stepping outside, she inhales the cool dawn air, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked wood and distant charcoal fires. The city feels suspended in this hour, before the peddlers cry their wares, before the samurai stomp through the streets, before the courtesans laugh behind painted fans. Kyo makes her way to the riverbank. There dozens of other young women are already gathering, each wrapped in dark kimonos, hair tied back tight to keep it from sticking to their damp necks. Some wear straw sandals, others shuffle barefoot through the dew-slick grass. They greet each other with short nods and half smiles, their voices soft and low as though not to disturb the spirits drifting in the fog. Some carry baskets of bedding from tea houses, others lug bundles of kimono from kabuki dressing rooms, each cloth carrying stories, spilled sake, fallen tears, whispered secrets pressed into sleeves. At the river's edge, Kyo wades in first, the water biting at her ankles. She spreads out the first kimono, its silk already heavy with the weight of perfume and sweat. She scrubs it with the rough end of her soap root bundle, working in slow, patient circles. Beside her, an older woman named Natsu beats a futon cover against a flat rock, her arms moving with the steady grace of a drum master. Each strike splashes small arcs of water into the morning air, catching the first hints of sunrise like tiny, vanishing rainbows. A few steps down, a girl no older than 12 kneels beside a pile of sopping cloth, her fingers raw and red. Kyo pauses her scrubbing to hand the girl a scrap of linen to wrap around her hands. The girl looks up, her eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. The women work together in quiet rhythm, scrubbing, beating, rinsing, wringing, laying cloths across smooth stones to catch the rising sun. Their movements echo like a slow dance, a ritual older than the painted bridges and the flower-arranging schools. Between tasks, they share small sips of barley tea from chipped cups, a shared warmth in the damp morning. Sometimes they trade jokes, small, whispered quips about merchants who never pay on time, or actors who stain their sleeves with sake. The laughter drifts lightly, like scattered plum blossoms on a pond. The hours stretch on the mist, slowly, lifting to reveal the shimmering surface of the canal. Dragonflies skim the water in brief flashes of emerald and gold. The sun rises higher, warming their damp sleeves and turning the pale river stones into small, heated islands beneath their feet. By midday, their fingers are wrinkled and rough, their backs beginning to ache from endless stooping and bending. But there is a kind of meditation in this repetition. Each piece of cloth a small universe of stains and folds, each swirl of water a fleeting echo of a hidden life. Occasionally, they pause to hang the first dry cloths on bamboo poles nearby. The fabrics flutter in the breeze, sending waves of scent, soap root, fresh river water, faint ghostly traces of perfume across the bank. The poles, lined with delicate kimono sleeves, look like rows of silent sentinels keeping watch over the city's secrets. When the sun dips slightly and the cicadas begin their steady chorus, Kyo pulls her final cloth from the water, wringing it tightly until droplets slide down her forearms. She lays it across a sun-warmed rock, smoothing each fold with care, as if preparing a sacred garment. Gathering the dried pieces into careful bundles, she ties them with soft rope and balances them on her shoulders. Each bundle feels like a whispered story, a moonlit confession carried carefully back to the waking world. As she begins the slow walk home, she pauses to adjust her load and gazes across the river. The floating tea houses now glow softly with afternoon light. their paper lanterns painted with cranes and chrysanthemums swaying gently. A musician practices a shamisen nearby, the notes curling into the warm air like a drifting incense trail. Kyo closes her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. In that inhale, she feels every thread and every drop of water, every silent glance exchanged at dawn, every delicate print of a kimono sleeve pressed into her palms. She walks onward, each footstep a gentle echo of centuries before her and of countless mornings yet to come. Back at her small home, she slides open the door softly, careful not to disturb her grandmother, who naps with a hand resting on a half-embroidered sash. Kyo sets down her bundles, unties her apron, and wipes her brow with a scrap of indigo cloth. She pours herself a small cup of lukewarm tea, breathing in its grassy scent. As she drinks, her gaze drifts over her brother's scattered wooden toys. The way the light lands on her grandmother's pale hair, the quiet hush of the room holding her safe. Later, she unties each bundle, folding every kimono and sash, checking for any missed creases. Each piece is laid out with the same reverence, as an offering at a shrine. In these folds live laughter, longing, small betrayals, and secret joys, all absorbed into the cloth and cleansed by her patient hands. When she finishes, she steps outside one last time to hang her apron under the eaves, where moonlight will soften it by morning. She stands quietly, looking up at the stars peeking through drifting clouds. The air smells of river stones and night jasmine, a subtle perfume of endings and beginnings. She rubs her hands together slowly, feeling the roughness of her palms, the tiny cuts from stones, the lingering warmth of sun-soaked fabric. With each breath, she sinks further into stillness, her mind a quiet pool beneath willow branches. Tomorrow, she will rise before the first rooster crows, before the lantern wicks are trimmed, before laughter wakes behind painted fans. She will slip once again into the dawn mist, where the hidden lifeblood of Edo flows quietly through soaproot and river songs. Tonight, she allows herself a small smile as she slides shut the paper door, stepping into the hush of her small, flickering world here. In this soft glow, let us rest beside her, still and weightless, cradled by the sighing rhythms of water, cloth, and moonlight. Stains of persimmon and ink asterisk. Good evening again, dear friend. Let your mind wander back to Edo's misty canals, to the gentle sway of lanterns reflected in midnight water, to the hush that holds a city just before it breathes awake. We return now to Kyo, who stirs once more before the sun dares to warm the rooftops. A faint drizzle patters against the clay tiles as she rises. The room smells of damp cedar and old paper screens. Outside, a nightingale calls to its mate from a hidden branch. Kyo's grandmother stirs, her breath catching softly as she shifts beneath her quilt. Kyo pauses, listening to her grandmother's slow breathing, as steady as the waves lapping at distant wooden docks. She wraps her headscarf carefully, tucks her hair beneath it, and pulls on her patched kimono. In the near dark, she prepares her small breakfast, a single pickled daikon slice and 2 small rice balls wrapped in wilted bamboo leaf. She eats in silence, chewing slowly, each grain of rice a tiny warmth that will hold her through the hours ahead. Outside, the alleyways are soaked and shimmering, puddles capturing thin moons and crooked roof lines. She carries her bamboo paddle, and her soaproot, her movements deliberate and quiet, so as not to disturb the spirits who still linger in the dark folds of morning at the riverbank. The other girls gather under straw hats, their feet splashing softly in the mud. Today, They bring heavier bundles, festival garments stained with sake, merchant robes smudged with ink, and delicate sashes marked with faint smears of persimmon. The night before, Edo celebrated a local festival, lanterns drifting down the Sumida River like a procession of floating stars. Musicians played flutes and drums. Vendors shouted above the river's hush. Laughter spilled like sake across the city's bridges. And in the aftermath, the hidden world of the laundry girls blooms in quiet necessity. Kyo selects her first garment, a deep indigo kimono with embroidered waves and cranes, its sleeves heavy with spilled plum wine. She sets it carefully across a low, flat rock near the water's edge. Her hands move methodically, tracing each stain with gentle curiosity. Each mark is a small mystery, a slip of the wrist, a dance to wild, a tearful confession. She prepares her soap root paste, crushing it between two smooth stones until it foams lightly. The smell is earthy and slightly bitter, like wet bark after a spring rain. With her bamboo paddle, she begins to tap and push the paste into the cloth, her rhythm slow and steady. Nearby, an older girl named Tamko works on a set of kabuki actors' sashes. Tamko has strong arms and a voice as bright as a festival bell. She hums softly as she scrubs, the melody weaving into the river's murmur. The water splashes against their calves as they move, cold and insistent, urging them to remain present. Each stroke becomes a soft vow to the unseen city, a vow to restore, to cleanse, to release stories caught in fabric folds. A sudden gust carries the scent of roasted sweet potatoes from a vendor cart upriver. Kyo's stomach stirs, but she keeps working. Her paddle moves like a slow heartbeat, punctuated by the occasional deep breath, her shoulders relaxing into the rhythm. At midday, they rest briefly. The girls gather on a dry patch of stones under the broad leaves of a ginkgo tree. One shares pickled plums wrapped in rice. Another passes a flask of barley tea. They laugh quietly, their voices shy as sparrows. Tamko tells a story of a kabuki actor who tore his sleeve during a secret meeting and demanded it be mended before sunrise. Another girl mimics the actor's dramatic cries, sending them into muffled giggles that echo over the water. Kyo listens, her laughter gentle, her eyes distant. She looks beyond the circle of girls to the far side of the river, where small fishing boats bob in the wake of a passing barge. A fisherman raises a hand in greeting, his face creased by sun and salt, and she nods back, her gaze softening. After the brief meal, they return to work. The afternoon sun begins to burn away the drizzle, leaving the stones warm beneath their feet. Steam rises from the soaked garments as they lay them across bamboo racks and smooth rocks. Kyo picks up a pale cream kimono marked with dark smudges, sumi ink from a calligrapher's hurried brush. She feels a small reverence for the ink, the way it once formed poems and love letters, edicts and secret confessions. With care, she dabs at each mark with a cloth soaked in rice water, moving slowly, as though coaxing words back into the well of memory. Each time the ink begins to fade, Kyo whispers a small breath of thanks, as if she has rescued a hidden sorrow from dissolving completely. She lays the kimono in the sun, watching the light reveal faint traces of old folds and stitching lines, each one a ghostly echo of the wearer's life. As the shadows stretch longer, dragonflies dart among the hanging fabrics. Their wings catch the sun, turning them into brief flames flickering in the humid air. The girls continue to work, their movements as fluid and measured as monks copying sacred texts. A young girl named Aya, who started only last month, struggles with a stiff obi sash stained deeply with soy sauce. Kyo moves beside her, gently taking her hands and showing her how to roll the fabric between smooth stones, how to twist and untwist so the fibers are not bruised. Iya's eyes widen with relief, and she bows deeply, her hair slipping loose over her cheeks. Later, as the day cools and shadows settle into the river's curves, Kyo gathers her last set of cleaned garments. She binds them into careful bundles, feeling the satisfying weight of the work completed. Each knot is tied with a small, whispered blessing for safe returns, for gentle wear, for laughter that leaves no heavy stains behind. She turns to help. Tamako lift a large basket. They carry it together along the narrow bank, stepping carefully between stones slick with moss. At the top of the embankment, an elderly woman waits with a small handcart, her back stooped, her kimono patterned with delicate irises. The woman's eyes brighten as she sees her newly washed kimono sleeves flutter in the breeze. She bows deeply, almost to the ground, her hands trembling as she receives the bundle. Tameko and Kyo bow back, their hearts warmed by the fragile gratitude that pulses between them as the last bundles are loaded. The girls wash their paddles and soapstones in the river, watching suds drift downstream like tiny, vanishing lanterns. The water carries away fragments of labor, of laughter, of hidden confessions whispered over soap-root paste. On her way home, Kyo stops at a small vendor cart. She buys a thin slice of persimmon, its flesh bright and sweet on her tongue, the juice running down her wrist. She savors it slowly, feeling it anchor her back into the present moment, that tastes like a soft chord vibrating under her ribs. She passes narrow alleys where lanterns flicker in doorways, painted with winding dragons and pale plum blossoms. Shadows slip behind bamboo screens. Laughter trails off in sudden silences. Each small sound deepens the feeling of a living city breathing in and out beneath the lantern glow. Returning home, she kneels beside her grandmother, who has been sorting old scraps of fabric for mending. The older woman's hands are spotted and frail, but her fingers still move deftly, tracing old stitching lines as though reading a beloved poem. Kyo sits quietly, taking up a corner of the pile. Together, they mend a faded sleeve, thread a loose hem, patch a small hole near a collar. They work in silence, the only sounds, the slow hiss of a kettle and the far-off echo of temple bells. After they finish, her grandmother pulls out a small lacquered box and opens it. Inside are dried lemon rinds, a few ginger slices, and a ball of sweetened bean paste. She hands these to Kyo in silence, a gentle thank you woven from countless mornings of shared hardship and care. Kyo prepares tea, the steam curling round their fingers, warming their faces. They sip together, the room fragrant with ginger and lemon. Outside, the moon rises, pale and watchful, catching on the edge of a roof tile and shimmering like a hidden tear. When the tea is gone, Kyo rolls out her futon and lies down, her head resting lightly on a small wooden pillow. Her grandmother hums a lullaby, the same tune she once sang to Kyo as a child. The melody drifts through the air like falling plum petals, each note carrying her further from the day's labor, further into the quiet depths of night. Her eyes close, her breath grows slow and soft. In her mind, she sees the river, the dragonflies, the ink bleeding into water, the quiet blessing of the woman who bowed nearly to the ground. She drifts now, between the folds of fabric and the hush of river stones, between moonlit kimonos and whispered prayers. In this place, every thread holds a secret, every stain a story, every rinse a quiet absolution. And so we rest here beside her, the scent of lemon rind and ginger lacing through the dark, the soft rustle of cloth echoing like a distant tide. Sleeves in the moonlight asterisk, good evening again, gentle dreamer. We return once more to Edo's floating world, to the narrow alleys shimmering under paper lanterns, to the faint hush of rice paper doors sliding shut, to the quiet pull of the river that cradles the city like an old lullaby tonight. We slip deeper into Keo's twilight hours, when the air is soft and fragrant, and each movement becomes a small offering to the moon above. The moon is full tonight, a pale circle mirrored in countless shallow ponds and rooftop rain basins. Keo steps outside, carrying a basket of folded kimonos and fresh linens. Her grandmother rests inside, her breathing deep and steady beneath a patched quilt. The small garden in front of their house shimmers under moonlight, the leaves of the bitter melon vine catching silver glimmers. Keo lifts her basket higher, balancing its weight carefully on her hip. She walks slowly down the alley, each footstep brushing against the quiet earth. At the corner, she greets an old neighbor who tends a single bamboo plant in a broken clay pot. He nods at her silently, and she bows in return, the basket shifting. Against her side, she heads toward a merchant's house first, a modest place with a narrow veranda and pale blue curtains. A small lantern glows inside, painting trembling shapes onto the street. Keo sets the bundle of washed cloths gently by the door, adjusting the corners as though tucking in a child for sleep. She bows deeply to the door, a small act of respect. In this city of fleeting pleasures and hidden sorrows, even a quiet cloth carries its own kind of spirit, and she treats each as though it listens. Moving on, she crosses a wooden bridge arched over a narrow canal. The water beneath glimmers with drifting petals and reflected stars. A cat perches on the far railing, grooming its paw lazily, its fur pale as moonlight. Keo pauses to watch it, her breath floating in small clouds above the water. She continues along a path lined with tea houses. Shadows flit behind lattice screens. The faint sound of shamisen strings curls into the night air like thin incense smoke. A lone voice laughs softly, followed by the clink of ceramic cups. Keo's eyes soften, and she holds her basket a little. Tighter at each tea house, she leaves bundles, robes, and sashes. Fine silk underkimono, delicate scarves dyed with plum blossom hues. She adjusts each piece carefully, brushing away stray threads, smoothing folds as though calming restless dreams. A courtesan named Hissa emerges from one of the houses, her hair high and ornate, decorated with slender pins shaped like wisteria. Her painted face looks like porcelain under the lantern's glow. She recognizes Keo and smiles, a tired, quiet smile that slides across her painted lips like a whisper of spring rain. They exchange a brief nod. No words pass between them, yet their gazes hold the shared knowledge of unspoken burdens, the weight of painted faces, of stained silk, of stories left to dry beside the river. As Keo moves on, her load grows lighter, and her steps slow even. More, she crosses a small garden path where moonflowers bloom, pale and open, their scent faintly sweet and elusive. She leans in to smell one, her face close enough to feel the brush of a cool petal against her cheek at the final stop. An elderly woman waits on a narrow veranda, her hands folded in her lap. She keeps a single lantern beside her, its veil of washi paper painted with a leaping carp. As Keo approaches, the woman rises slowly, her joints cracking softly like bamboo in the wind. They bow to each other, deeply and deliberately. The woman accepts the last bundle of folded linen, cradling it against her chest as though it were a beloved grandchild. She opens a small pouch at her side and presses 2 pickled plums into Kyo's hand, a quiet thank you that tastes of salt and sunset fields. Kyo bows again, sliding the plums into her sleeve. She turns back toward home, her arms now free, her body loose and floating in the humid night. The moon follows her, slipping between the shadows of tiled roofs and low garden walls. Crickets begin their gentle songs, and the distant call of a night heron echoes across the canal. Each sound blends into a quiet lullaby that seems meant only for her. Crossing the bridge once more, she pauses to watch the water. A few lanterns from an earlier festival still drift there, their paper frames sagging, their light dim but stubbornly glowing. She kneels, leaning over the rail to see her own reflection, her face soft and damp from the night air, her eyes bright but heavy with long weeks of work in that pale mirror. She sees not just herself, but the echoes of other women, her grandmother, sewing by lamplight, Aya learning to twist obi sashes at dawn, Tameko laughing by the river's edge. She thinks of Hiss's painted smile, of the merchant's wrinkled hands smoothing his robe's collar, of the old neighbor's bamboo plant reaching for moonlight. She watches a lantern pass beneath the bridge, its flame flickering against the slow current. Quietly, she whispers a small prayer, for safe journeys, for gentle mornings, for stains that wash away with ease. Her words drift into the water, carried off beneath the city's sleeping roofs. When she stands again, her legs feel light, almost hollow, as if the moonlight has seeped into her bones. She walks the final stretch home slowly, savoring each echo of her wooden sandals against the stone path. Reaching her house, she slides open the door softly. The interior is dark except for the glow of a single oil lamp. Her grandmother has already fallen asleep again, her hand resting gently on an unfinished sash in her lap. Kyo steps to her own futon, sets down the pickled plums beside her small wooden pillow, and begins to untie her hair. Each pin and cloth strip falls away like tiny petals, each motion loosening her day's burdens. Her hair tumbles over her shoulders, a dark curtain that catches the lamplight and softens the room even further. She kneels and wipes her face with a damp cloth, the scent of soaproot and river stones still clinging to her skin. She breathes deeply, filling her lungs with the delicate night air that filters through the cracked shoshi screens. She untucks her worn kimono and folds it neatly. At her side, as she slides under the thin quilt, her body sinks into the mat like a pebble into still water. She feels each muscle unravel, each joint sigh in gratitude. Lying on her side, she brings one hand to her cheek and closes her eyes. In her mind, the moonflowers bloom again, the river glimmers softly, and lanterns drift endlessly beyond sight. Her breathing slows. She imagines her hands scrubbing away stains that were never hers to carry, smoothing creases that hid whispered confessions, tying bundles that held entire lifetimes folded into silken sleeves. The soft rustle of her grandmother's quilt nearby sounds like distant waves on a stony shore. Outside, the wind stirs the garden leaves, as though it too wishes to sing her to sleep. A final breath in, she tastes the faint salt of the pickled plums still on her lips. A final breath out, she hears the hush of the moon settling into the sky, the quiet shuffle of cats prowling among the market refuse, the fading echo of a single shamisen note somewhere across the darkened city. And in this last drifting moment, She is neither laundry girl nor daughter, neither servant nor silent witness. She is simply Kyo, a ripple in the floating world's quiet sea, a lantern bobbing gently beyond reach. Here, with her, we rest two cradled in soft moonlight, wrapped in the scent of clean linen and lemon rind, floating beyond words into the endless dark that hums just beneath our eyelids. Sleep well, gentle friend. Sleep as Kyo sleeps, with every stain washed away, every secret folded into quiet, every breath a soft ripple across a moonlit river. And now, let's drift into a different time, a different place. Story 5. The Olive Press of Eleusis. The months without her, before the fields fell silent. Asterisk. Good evening, dear friend. Rest your head a little deeper into your pillow. Breathe slowly, and imagine a different land now, far from the lantern-lit canals of Edo, beyond the drifting plum petals and quiet riverbanks. Tonight, we wander toward the warm hills of ancient Greece, where olive groves ripple under moonlight, and the cicadas' songs float over stony terraces. Here, in a place called Eleusis, a story unfolded quietly between the silvery leaves and sunburnt earth. A story of waiting, of loss, of hands that pressed fruit into oil as they waited for a daughter to return. Let us begin before the fields fell silent in the small moments when the earth still sang, and women rose before dawn to tend the olive trees. In the first blue hour of morning, before Apollo's chariot rose over the horizon, you find yourself standing at the edge of an olive grove. The air is thick with dew, and a soft fog weaves between gnarled trunks. Each tree seems to hold a secret, a memory of laughter, a silent prayer whispered into barked up. A woman named Philea emerges from a low stone doorway nearby. Her hair is wrapped in a linen scarf, and her hands are stained from decades of harvests. She carries a wooden basket, patched many times, its handle smoothed. By years of labor, she moves slowly at first, testing each step on the rocky path. Her sandals slip against small stones, but she knows each bend and dip as if it were her own skin. From behind her house, a thin column of smoke rises, a cooking hearth where her sister stirs barley porridge for the workers who will arrive. Soon, Philea sets the basket under the first tree and pauses, laying her palm against its trunk. The bark is rough and cool, and she feels the faint vibration of cicadas still hidden in the shadows. She breathes deeply, inhaling the sharp scent of crushed olive leaves and the earthy musk of moist soil. In these early hours, before the sun hardens the land, the women of Eleusis prepare to gather the olives. Each fruit holds a different texture, some firm and glossy, others puckered and dark, hinting at the oil held inside like a secret. A few paces away, Philea's neighbor, Calanera, begins her own silent work. She shakes a low branch gently, watching olives tumble onto the woven mats laid beneath. The small pops and soft thuds echo across the grove, like the beginning of a rainstorm. The two women exchange a glance and a small nod. No words pass between them, for the language of this hour is one of breath and movement. The soft slide of baskets across stones, the whisper of linen sleeves against rough bark. Birdsong begins to rise as the sun peaks above the eastern hills. It slices thin lines of light across the olive leaves, turning each dewdrop into a tiny golden coin. The women move more quickly now, gathering handfuls of fruit, checking each for spots or bruises. Once the baskets are half full, they pause to rest on low stones. They drink water stored in clay jugs, cooled overnight. Philea runs her thumb along the rim of her jug, tracing a small crack that has grown each season. She remembers when her daughter, Chloe, helped her carry water from the well, their laughter echoing through the grove, scaring birds from the fig trees. But Chloe is gone now. Long ago, she vanished beyond the earth's green threshold, taken into the realm below, where shadows bloom and pomegranate seeds whisper strange promises. Each year, when the earth grows quiet, Philea feels that absence as a weight on her ribs, a hush in her bones. She presses her eyes closed, lets the memory pass, and stands again, shaking out her sleeves. Calanera offers her a handful of barley, bread, and they chew in silence, crumbs falling like pale petals onto the mossy stones. In the distance, young boys lead donkeys up a narrow path, baskets tied on either side, swaying gently with each step. They bring tools and more mats, fresh, linen bags for the olives. The boys laugh and sing small songs, their voices light and bright as morning sparrows. The grove begins to fill with quiet movement, baskets shifting, mats unfolding, branches shaking softly. Dust rises in slow spirals, catching the new light. In small, shimmering halos, at midday, the air grows heavy and the light sharpens into thin blades that pierce the shade. The women retreat briefly to a rough shelter built of woven reeds and olive branches. There they share figs and salted fish, sip sour wine, and rub their raking palms with olive oil scented faintly with myrtle. Philea sits with her back against the shelter wall, her head resting on a folded cloak. Her eyes drift closed, and she hears the sound of bees humming in the distance. In her half-dream, she sees Chloe running among the trees, her laughter weaving through the branches like a bright ribbon. When she wakes, the shadows have shifted, and the air carries a sharper edge. She wipes her eyes discreetly, stands, and returns to the grove. The afternoon becomes a blur of gestures, reaching, gathering, sorting, lifting. Olive leaves cling to her hair, her skin shines with sweat, her fingernails rimmed with dark green. Stains occasionally, she pauses to straighten her back and gaze across the sun-bleached fields, where low stone walls divide small gardens from grazing lands. In the far distance, the faint line of the sea shimmers, a thin invitation to other stories, other worlds. As evening slides in, the grove hushes once more. The last olives are gathered, the baskets heavy and fragrant. The boys lead the donkeys, back down the path, singing slower songs now, voices low and sweet. Philea and Calanera stay behind to tidy the mats, fold them carefully, stack them under a tree. Each movement feels like sealing a letter, each fold a quiet farewell to the day's labor. Before leaving, Philea kneels at the base of the oldest tree, a broad, gnarled olive that has stood since her grandmother's time. She presses her forehead to its trunk, murmuring a prayer not in words but in small, broken breaths. In the sky above, the first star appears, a single bright needle in a tapestry of violet dusk. Philea lifts her head and watches it flicker, her mind drifting to the underworld's dark fields, to the daughter who walks among shades. She gathers her cloak, lifts her basket, and begins the slow descent back to her stone house. As she walks, the cicadas start their evening hymn, a sound as old as the earth's first sigh. At her doorway, she pauses to look back at the grove one last time. The trees stand silent now, their leaves shimmering in the last pale wash of twilight. She imagines them whispering to each other, sharing the day's secrets, waiting for morning's gentle hands. Inside, a small oil lamp flickers. Her sister has left a bowl of lentil stew beside the hearth, its scent warm and earthy. Thalea sets down her basket, unties her scarf, and smooths her hair with her palms. She eats slowly, each spoonful a balm against the deep, quiet ache beneath. Her ribs, when the bowl is empty, she places it near the hearth, wraps herself in a thin blanket, and lies on a low mat. Her fingers curl around a small olive wood charm she wears on a cord, a simple token of the grove, of Chloe, of all that has been carried and lost and carried again, outside. The grove sleeps beneath a moon that glows like a silent patient, witness. The olive trees breathe softly, their roots dreaming in the dark soil. In that hush, Thalea drifts into sleep, her breath slow and steady, her dreams stitched with silver leaves, and the sound of footsteps she hopes to hear again. Here, beneath the whispering branches and beyond the reach of dawn, we rest beside her, every olive leaf a lullaby, every cicada note a small promise that the earth remembers, and so do we. Beneath the pomegranate asterisk, good evening again, kind traveler. You're safe here, wrapped in your soft blanket, you're breathing calm and deep. Tonight we return to the fields of Eleusis, where moonlight gathers in quiet pools among the olive. Trees and old stones whisper beneath wandering feet. When last we saw Thalea, she drifted into sleep with the hush of cicadas cradling her heart. Now the moon climbs higher over the grove, painting silver shadows onto the rough stone walls. In the stillness, a soft wind stirs the branches, and the olive leaves murmur like distant voices, sharing secrets only the night can hear in her sleep. Thalea dreams of her daughter, Chloe. She sees her as she once was, a young girl with dark curls escaping a linen scarf, her hands sticky with honey after stealing figs from a neighbor's orchard. Chloe runs between the trees, her laughter bright enough to turn morning dew into pearls. But in the dream, as Thalea tries to reach her, Chloe slips behind a veil of white mist. The mist thickens, curling around her ankles, swallowing her gentle form until only her voice lingers, calling softly from some unseen shore. Thalea stretches out her arms, but the weight of sleep holds her back like cool clay. She wakes before dawn. Her breath catches in her throat, her cheeks damp from dream tears. The oil lamp beside her has burned out, leaving only a thin thread of smoke curling into the dark. She lies still for a moment, listening to the faint stirrings of her sister, preparing the morning hearth. With a slow exhale, Thalea rises, wraps her blanket tighter around her shoulders, and crosses the room to the basin. She splashes cold water onto her face, each drop a sharp awakening. Her fingers tremble slightly as she rubs her cheeks dry. In the kitchen corner, her sister Melite hums softly as she stirs barley porridge. The scent is earthy and warm, carrying the promise of another day's labor. Melite glances up, offering a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting quiet understanding rather than questions. They eat together in silence. The only sounds, the soft scrape of wooden spoons against clay bowls. The dawn light trickles in through narrow windows, painting pale lines across the worn floor. When the last bite is swallowed, Thalea gathers her hair under a scarf and reaches for the olive wood charm around her neck. She closes her fingers over it for a long moment, a silent ritual to anchor her heart. Outside, the grove glistens under a veil of morning mist. The air carries the faint scent of myrtle and crushed mint from nearby gardens. Thalea's sandals tap softly against the path as she approaches the small stone press built generations before. The olive press stands low and sturdy, its round stone wheel etched with marks from countless seasons. Here, she begins the slow, deliberate work of pressing the olives gathered the day before. She pours baskets of fruit into a shallow basin, sorting each handful, picking out small twigs and stray leaves. Her fingers move gently, as if handling tiny birds rather than olives. With each pass of the heavy stone wheel, dark green pulp oozes and trickles into waiting clay jars. The smell is rich and sharp, a mingling of earth and sun, leaf and fruit. Thaleia hums softly as she works, her voice rising and falling in slow waves. A lullaby for no one and everyone at once. Now and then she pauses to rest her shoulders, looking out toward the sea's pale glimmer on the horizon. The waves are too distant to hear, but she imagines their sighing rhythm, the same rhythm she feels under her skin whenever she dreams of Chloe Dot. Other women arrive to help, each bringing their own baskets and jugs. They greet Thaleia with small nods and gentle touches on the shoulder. The press becomes a quiet gathering place, a sanctuary of whispered exchanges and patient gestures as they work. They tell small stories to each other, of her neighbors, goats that wandered into the fig orchard and refused to leave, of a young boy's first attempt at shaping clay pots that collapsed in the kiln, of a visiting merchant who offered sweet almonds in exchange for a single jar of oil. Laughter bubbles up in small bursts, soft as drifting petals. The stories braid themselves into the day's rhythm, each tale a thread woven into the fabric of the grove's memory. By midday, the air grows warm and heavy. Cicadas begin their sharp serenade, and sweat gathers along Thaleia's brow. She wipes it away with the edge of her sleeve, her palms now stained deep green. They take a break beneath a fig tree, where a patch of shade offers momentary relief. Someone passes a jar of honey water, and Thaleia drinks slowly, feeling the coolness slip down her throat like a gentle stream. As she rests, she unties a small cloth bundle hidden in her sash. Inside are 2 pomegranate seeds, shriveled and dark red. She stares at them for a long moment, her thumb brushing their hardened skins. These seeds, kept from an old harvest festival, hold a special place in her heart. They remind her of Persephone, the maiden who ate pomegranate seeds and was bound to the underworld for part of every year. Like Persephone's mother, Demeter, Thaleia waits each year, feeling her own earth turn barren in Chloe's absence. After their break, the women return to the press, the heavy wheel rolling again, each creak and groan echoing across the stones like a slow, deep breath. Thaleia focuses on her hands, on the pulp beneath her fingers, on the gentle rush of oil that glistens like new moonlight. By evening, the jars are full, their rims sealed with wax to keep the precious oil safe. The last rays of sun slip behind the olive grove, turning the leaves to molten silver. The air cools, and the cicada's songs fade into a deeper, slower chorus. The women help each other load the jars onto low carts. They cover each vessel with linen cloths to protect them from dust and moon dew. One by one, they begin their slow walk home, carts creaking softly over the rough path. Thaleia lingers at the press, her fingers brushing over the stained stone, tracing the ancient grooves as if reading an old poem carved in secret language. She closes her eyes and imagines Chloe's small fingers playing in these grooves, laughing when olive oil spilled onto her toes. With a final deep breath, she gathers her scarf and turns toward home. The path is darker now, moonlight weaving in and out of olive branches above her head. Each step feels heavy and hollow, yet full of quiet knowing. She passes an old shrine at the grove's edge, a simple structure of stacked stones with a small niche holding a clay figure of Demeter. A dried garland of marigolds hangs beside it, its petals curled and brittle. Thaleia kneels there, places the 2 pomegranate seeds at the shrine's base, and whispers a quiet plea. For the return, she breathes, for warmth, for the fields. To sing again, she bows deeply, her forehead touching the cool earth. The wind moves gently through the grove, as if carrying her words into the roots below. When she finally stands, she feels a softness in her chest, not release exactly, but a tender space where sorrow and hope sit side by side like old friends. Home. Melody waits with a lamp burning low. The soft glow dances across the walls, revealing the simple tools of their life: a spindle, a woven basket, a jar of barley flour, a small pile of pressed olive cakes. Melite takes Thaleia's stained hands and rubs them gently with warm water and a paste of ground chickpeas and oil. The mixture soothes each crack, each rough edge. The smell of chickpea, earthy and comforting. They share a supper of lentil stew, olives, and a heel of coarse bread dipped in the day's fresh oil. Thaleia closes her eyes with each bite, feeling the oil's warmth spread through her, a quiet reminder of the grove's persistent heartbeat. Later, as the lamp dims, Thaleia settles onto her mat, the olive wood charm resting against her collarbone. Her fingers curl around it lightly, her breath slowing as the night presses in. Outside, the moon rises higher, spilling over the fields and the sea beyond. In that silver hush, she feels Chloe's presence flicker at the edge of her mind. A warmth that never fully leaves, a thread woven through each season's tapestry. Tonight, she drifts towards sleep beneath the pomegranate moon, her dreams carrying her through olive branches and fig orchards, into the soft dark where all lost daughters wait to be found again. And so, we rest beside her in the breath between harvests, in the echo of the pressed stone, in the quiet promise that even in the months without her, the earth remembers every footstep, every laugh, every whispered vow. When the earth breathes again, good evening again, gentle dreamer. Let your eyelids grow heavy as you sink deeper into the hush of this timeless grove. We return now to Eleusis, where olives glisten under morning mists and pomegranate seeds pulse. Quietly in the dark, the moon has slipped across the sky, and now dawn's first blush spills over the low stone walls, draping them in a soft, pearly glow. In Thaleia's small stone house, the oil lamp sputters and sighs, its final flame curling into pale smoke. Thaleia stirs beneath her thin blanket, her fingers instinctively closing around the olive wood charm at her neck. The charm is warm against her skin, as though it holds the echo of Chloe's laughter. Still drifting somewhere just beyond the waking world, she rises slowly, her body stiff from days of pressing and carrying. She pours water from a clay jug into a chipped basin and splashes her face, the shock of cold pulling her fully into the pale light of morning. She wipes her cheeks gently with a rough linen cloth, feeling each thread drag across her tired skin. Like a distant wave, her sister, Melite, stirs a pot of barley gruel over the hearth. The scent is faint and earthy, a humble offering to greet the sun. Melite hums a small tune, the same lullaby their mother once sang during long winter nights. They eat together in quiet companionship, each spoonful an unspoken reassurance that even in absence, some bonds remain unbroken. Melite smiles softly, touching Thaleia's wrist for a moment before returning to her bowl. After eating, Thaleia gathers her tools, a small curved knife for pruning branches, an old woven basket with frayed edges, and a cloth bundle containing figs and olives for her midday rest. She ties her scarf over her hair and steps into the new day. The grove greets her with a shiver of leaves. A gentle breeze rustles through, carrying the scent of myrtle and crushed thyme. The cicadas have not yet begun their song, leaving the morning steeped in a profound stillness. Thaleia begins her slow circuit through the trees. She pauses at each trunk, feeling its rough bark beneath her palm, listening as though each tree might murmur back some hidden word of comfort. Her fingers seek small branches to prune, removing withered shoots so that fresh growth can flourish when the earth warms fully again as she moves. She whispers quiet blessings into the grove, her voice barely above the hush of the wind. Each blessing is a thread woven into the soil, a promise that life will return in its own slow rhythm. At the edge of the grove, she finds the oldest olive tree, its trunk wide and twisted, a living monument to centuries of whispered prayers and tearful confessions. Thaleia kneels, tracing the gnarled knots with reverent fingers in her mind. She sees Chloe's young hands plucking olives, her small feet darting between the roots, her face lit with a sunbeam smile. The memory is both sharp and soft, a wound that breathes instead of bleeds. Thaleia presses her forehead to the trunk and closes her eyes. In that darkness, she feels the slow, deep pulse of the earth beneath her, a patient heartbeat that holds every joy and sorrow in equal measure. A small bee lands on her shoulder, its legs dusted with golden pollen. She remains still, feeling its tiny tremors as it rests before flitting back into the grove. She smiles softly, her breath catching on the edge of a laugh and a sob. The day drifts forward in gentle ripples. The sun climbs slowly, painting dappled patterns across her path. Around noon, Thaleia settles beneath a fig tree, unwrapping her cloth bundle. She eats slowly, savoring each fig's sweetness and each olive's quiet bitterness. She watches the grove's leaves sway above her, their undersides shimmering silver in the sun. Between their movements, she catches glimpses of sky so bright it stings her eyes. A soft breeze passes over her skin, and she imagines it as Chloe's small fingers, brushing her cheek, a tender greeting from somewhere beyond the veil. After her meal, she lies on her back, the earth warm beneath her. Her fingers curl into the dry grass, feeling the quiet vibrations of burrowing insects and the slow dance of roots deep below. In that suspended moment, she begins to dream even while half awake. She sees the underworld's fields, vast and quiet, shaded in deep violets and indigos, dotted with ghostly poppies and pomegranate trees, heavy with fruit. She imagines Chloe wandering there, her fingers brushing petals that shiver and vanish into mist. She watches her daughter bend to pluck a pomegranate, the seeds shining like drops of garnet. In the dream, Chloe turns toward her, and for a moment, Thaleia almost hears her voice. "Mother, I am not lost. I am only away for a season." She tries to call back, but the words slip from her mouth like scattered olive pits. A sudden rustling startles her, fully awake. A neighbor's young daughter, Murin, stands nearby, her eyes wide and curious. She holds a small clay jug and a folded cloth. "Thaleia," the girl says shyly, "Mother asked me to bring you cool water. She says the sun is too harsh today." Thaleia smiles, her heart tightening with gratitude. She sits up, accepts the jug, and thanks Murin with a gentle pat on her hand. The water is cool and sweet, tasting faintly of lemon balm. They sit together in the shade for a while, Murin chatting softly about her morning chores, feeding goats, gathering herbs, helping her mother spin wool. Her voice is a gentle song, weaving through the branches above them. When Murrin leaves, Thalea lingers a little longer beneath the tree, feeling the echoes of the girl's presence like a comforting shawl as the afternoon drifts on. She rises and resumes her gentle pruning. The olive trees welcome her slow, careful touch. Each cut she makes is precise and loving, as if sculpting the air into shapes only the heart can see dot in the late light. She carries fallen branches to a small pile at the grove's edge, where they will later be dried and used for winter fires. The sun lowers, painting the grove in warm honey hues. Shadows lengthen and fold into each other like sleeping animals. The first stars prick the sky, timid and pale against the fading blue. Gathers her tools, ties her basket closed, and begins her walk home. She pauses often, turning to watch the shifting colors, as if the sky itself were a tapestry slowly being woven and unpicked at the same time at her doorway. Melite waits, a small oil lamp glowing in her hands. The light flickers across her gentle face, and for a moment Thalea imagines Chloe standing there instead, her laughter bubbling through the twilight. She steps inside. Melite takes her tools and sets them aside. Together, they share a supper of boiled lentils, olives, and a thick slice of barley bread dipped in the day's fresh oil. After supper, Melite combs Thalea's hair gently by lamplight, untangling small knots with patient fingers. Thalea closes her eyes, her head sinking into the touch. Once her hair is braided, she lies on her mat, the olive wood charm once again resting against her chest. Outside, the grove sighs under a veil of stars, the earth breathing in long, slow waves in her dreams. Thalea sees Chloe again, older now, her eyes luminous, her hands steady. She walks through a sunlit meadow beyond the underworld fields, holding a basket overflowing with pomegranates and olive branches. She turns to her mother and smiles, her voice echoing like distant temple bells. I will return. When the earth opens its arms again, I will step into the light. Thalea reaches out, her fingers brushing the edge of Chloe's cloak, feeling warmth pulse through her like the first spring rain after a long drought. She wakes slowly, dawn just brushing the sky, the air carrying the faintest warmth of the coming season. For the first time in many months, she feels the grove humming with a new pulse, like a heart rediscovering its rhythm after a long, frozen silence. She presses her hand to her chest and smiles, her breath catching on a soft sob that is part sorrow, part joy. She rises and steps outside. The first buds tremble on olive branches, their pale tips catching the earliest light. The cicadas hold their breath, waiting for the sun's full embrace. In that quiet, endless moment, Thalea stands beneath the awakening trees, her fingers open as if to catch every promise drifting through the morning air. Here, at the edge of loss and return, she feels Chloe's presence, not as a ghost in the shadows, but as a pulse in the roots, a whisper in the leaves, a soft laugh behind each petal's curve. And so the earth breathes again. You, dear dreamer, drift beside her. Now, feel the warmth blooming under your ribs, the olive leaves swaying above your closed eyes, the gentle hush of a mother's whispered vow. Sleep here in this soft dawn. Sleep as the grove learns to sing again. Sleep as the moon lingers on pomegranate. Skins in each olive branch reaches for tomorrow. And now, let's drift into a different time, a different place,